The broadcast of the regular meeting of the Business Inspections, Housing and Zoning Committee will now begin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Business Inspections and Housing and Zoning Committee for today, November 17th, 2020. I'm Lisa Goodman and I'm chairing the committee today. As we begin, I'll note for the record that this meeting has remote participation by members of the City Council and city staff. This is authorized under Minnesota Statute 13D.021 as a result of the declared local public health emergency. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify a quorum for this meeting.
Councilmember Reich. Gordon.
Here.
Assman.
Present.
Ellison.
Present.
Schrader.
Here.
Chair Goodman.
Present.
Councilmember Reich. There are 5 present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. The agenda for today's meeting is in front of us. I'll begin with the consent agenda, which includes items 9 through 29 on the agenda. I'll also include item 30 under receive and file. Item number 9 are the liquor license approvals, and item number 10 are the gambling license approvals. I'll note the gambling license approval is for Edison Community and Sports Foundation, and the liquor license approvals are for Arbiter Brewing Company, Casa Maria, Famous Dave's, and One Fermentary Tap Room. Item number 11 are license operating conditions for the rental dwelling license at 3401-03 17th Avenue South in the 9th Ward. Item 12 is a bid for plumbing services for rental properties. Item 13 is a carry forward of year 2020's tax exempt housing revenue bonds. Item 14 is an affordability housing loan with People Serving People. This is authorizing the forgiveness of accrued interest. Item number 15 are exclusive development rights for an extension at Snelling Yards, which is at 3601 East 44th Street. Item 16 is a contract amendment with River Services for the Upper Harbor Terminal Property Management Services on a month-to-month basis. Item 17 is an agreement with the Met Council to place a bus shelter at 2103 West Broadway. Item 18 is approving an emergency solutions grant capital funding recommendation for St. Anne's Place on Russell by Ascension Place. Item 19 is an affordable housing trust fund appropriation. This is authorizing a one-time appropriation of about 1.6 million of 2020 CDBG money to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Item number 20 is the EAW for 21 North Washington, formerly known as 240 Hennepin. This is declaring it adequate, the EAW adequate, and approving the determination that an EIS is not required. Item 21 is a rezoning on behalf of Norway House. This is at 907 East Franklin. Item number 22 is passing the ordinance with regard to allowing exterior security barriers. Item 23 is a contract amendment with MPHA for Stable Homes, Stable Schools. Item 24 is a resolution recognizing the community-led process for cultural and economic recovery at Minnehaha and East Lake Street. Item 25, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are all land sales. Item 30 is receiving and filing the 2020 third quarter report for Stable Homes, Stable Schools. I'll note that we will have an actual report on the quarter 4 year-end report, but not today. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda or the receive and file portions of the agenda, or any items anyone would like to pull off for further discussion? Seeing that there are no other items to be discussed or pulled, I'm going to move item 9 through 30 and ask the clerk to call the roll and hope my dog calms down shortly.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye. Aye.
Assman.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Chair Goodman.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
Those items have been approved. We'll now move on to the joint public hearing with the MCDA Operating Committee for item number 1. As background, the MCDA Operating Committee was the city's development agency from 1981 until the formation of CPED in 2003. It still exists as a separate legal entity for certain limited purposes. A small number of CPED items, primarily bank qualified, bank direct, tax exempt 501c3 revenue bonds and MCDA owned assets, require approval by the MCDA Board of Commissioners in addition to City Council approval. The City Council serves as the MCDA Board of Commissioners. The MCDA Operating Committee, comprised of members of this committee, the BIZ committee, considers items prior to the MCDA board action, and item number 1 is a joint public hearing of the BIZ committee and the MCDA Operating Committee. With that, I'll ask staff to give a presentation on item number 1, which is a bond issuance for De La Salle High School. Mr.
Thank you,
Curtis.
Madam Chair. This is Charles Curtis from CPED and members of the committee. I want to thank you for the background on MCDA. I sometimes forget its old history. What you have before you here is a request for preliminary and final approval of $2 million in tax-exempt 501c3 nonprofit revenue bonds for De La Salle High School. This is one of the bank-qualified, bank-direct revenue bonds that we are allowed to do. The De La Salle intends to invest the money in their facility to increase the air filtration of their HVAC system. Of course, this is brought on by the virus currently going around to try to protect students and staff. The bonds have been used by the school before in the past, and they will be privately placed as they have in the past with Northeast Bank. I may have someone here, I tried to, if there are questions, but I'll be happy to try to give you any information that you can ask.
Thank you for your report, Mr. Curtis. Are there any questions for Mr. Curtis on item number 1? Seeing no questions of Mr. Curtis, I'm going to proceed to open the joint public hearing and ask the clerk if there are any speakers in queue on item number 1.
There's one person in queue, George Sherman, if you're on the line.
He's not going to be here for De La Salle, I would guess. Mr. Sherman has an item on this agenda, and it's not this one. But he can speak for himself. Maybe he wants to speak to the De La Salle bonds.
That's correct, Madam Chair.
So I'll ask the clerk again if there is anyone signed up for item number 1, which is the De La Salle bond issuance.
With that, there are no speakers registered for item 1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to then close the public hearing, seeing that there are no further speakers, and call on Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to move approval of this item.
Item number 1 has been moved by Councilmember Ellison. I'd ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Reich,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Osmond,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Chair Goodman.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
That item is approved, and that concludes the joint MCDA BIZ committee agenda item. With that, we'll move on to the public hearing agenda, starting with item number 2, which is the Rand Tower on sale liquor and general entertainment license. Mr. Velasquez or Ms. Harvett.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Enrique Velasquez, Manager of Licenses and Consumer Services, presenting an application from Rand Tower Hotel, operated by Oxford Hotels and Resorts, LLC. Rand Tower Hotel is located at 527 Marquette Avenue South in Ward 7, and this report was prepared by Inspector Michelle Harvett. The applicant requests an on-sale liquor with Sunday sales general entertainment license, as well as a hotel license. Rand Tower Hotel is in the newly remodeled Rand Tower building and will have 270 guest rooms, indoor seating for 270 patrons between the first floor lounge and the 5th floor restaurant. The 5th floor open air terrace will provide additional outdoor seating for 40 patrons. The proposed hours of operation are 6:30 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. daily. On October 26th, 41 public hearing notices were sent to property owners within 450 feet of the premises. They were also sent to the Downtown Minneapolis Neighborhood Association, the Warehouse District Business Association, and to Councilmember Goodman. Notices were posted at the Wren Tower Hotel and surrounding multi-residential buildings. We received one response to the public hearing announcement, which is in support of the application. The Licenses and Consumer Services Division recommends approval of an on-sale liquor with Sunday sales, general entertainment license, and hotel license for Wren Tower Hotel. This concludes my presentation, and at this time, I'll stand for any comments or questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Velasquez on item number 2? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing on item number 2. Ask the clerk if there are any speakers in queue on this item.
Yes, Madam Chair, Dennis Wilson is registered for item number 2. If you can press *6, please.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Mr. Wilson. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I just wanted to come on and say, thank you for everything. We're very excited to be a part of downtown Minneapolis, and we're looking forward to having everyone into the Wren Tower Hotel so we can show you the beautiful restoration we did to the Wren Tower.
Thank you so much for your investment during this time. We appreciate you being on a call today. We'll see if there's anyone else here for the public hearing.
No further speakers registered for item 2.
Seeing no further speakers, I will close the public hearing, Madam Clerk, and move to approve the staff recommendation.
Councilmember Reich,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Osman,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
and Chair Goodman.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
That carries, and that motion is approved. We'll move on to item number 3, which is an interim use permit on behalf of Rescue Now Services at 697 13th Avenue Northeast. And I'd ask our staff, I believe it's Ms. Sether, to give a presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Goodman, council members. Item number 3 on today's agenda is for an interim use permit in lieu of a conditional use permit to allow for an overnight shelter accessory to an existing place of assembly located at 697 13th Avenue Northeast. It's located at the northwest corner of Monroe and 13th Avenue Northeast, just north of Logan Park. The subject property is, I'm sorry, next slide, please. The subject property is zoned R2B 2-family district. An overnight shelter is allowed with a conditional use permit when accessory to a place of assembly. In lieu of applying for a conditional use permit, an applicant can seek an interim use permit to allow for a maximum duration of that interim use permit for up to 5 years. The applicant is proposing to add an overnight shelter for up to 50 people as part of the City of Minneapolis and Hennepin County Homeless Response and Homeless Expansion Shelter Capacity Program of 2020. This temporary overnight shelter would occur on an annual basis from November 20th through May 31st, although that would not be possible this year as the public hearing for this item is not until today, and this item will go on to the City Council on December 4th. But they've asked for up to the 5 years, which would take them until December 4th of 2025. The applicant has been working with the Minnesota Department of Health and their COVID team to safely house 20 women and 30 men who were previously living at the Logan Park encampment and are currently staying in nearby hotels. Staff has received a number of public comments regarding this proposed interim use permit, and they have been included in the public record for today's meeting. Staff is recommending approval with 2 findings. There was a memorandum prepared earlier today for your consideration to clarify, and staff is making the recommendation based on the following findings. Staff finds that the establishment of the overnight shelter existing to or accessory to the existing religious institution within the existing building would not be detrimental to the health, safety, or comfort or general welfare. The space that you can see before you in the floor plan was inspected by our fire inspection services colleague, Brad Schmull, recently, and he identified that the space where occupants would be staying overnight does have both a sprinkler and a fire suppression system. And presently, and the applicant has also been meeting with the Department of Health to comply with COVID requirements to ensure on-site compliance. There will be staff from the 2020 Rescue Now Homeless Shelter overseeing day-to-day operations, as well as providing support services, case management, and full-time security to assist in de-escalating any issues inside or outside the facility. Shelter guests will have overnight accommodations in the existing building. In our understanding from the applicant, Dr. Whitley, they will transfer to another nearby church as a day shelter, which would provide space, activity, and programs. Therefore, staff finds that the proposed overnight shelter would comply with this finding as long as it meets the applicable building codes and housing maintenance ordinances. Further, staff finds that the proposed overnight shelter will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the vicinity and not impede on the normal and orderly development and improvement for surrounding property. The shelter occupants were previously occupying the Logan Park encampment and are now going to be housed within an existing building. The surrounding area is fully developed and located within an existing residential and commercial area. Staff finds that adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and necessary facilities have been provided. If approved, the shelter would have to be evaluated for residential occupancy and may require building permits to address any egress, or the fire suppression has already been evaluated since staff had prepared the staff report. Any future work shall comply with the zoning code, building code, and housing maintenance ordinances. There is not a minimum off-street parking requirement for an overnight shelter, but the area is well served by transit, including the Metro Transit number 17 bus, 1 block to the south, and the number 10 that is along Central Avenue, 3 blocks to the east. Staff has added housing policies that are consistent with supporting the proposed shelter on page 4 of the staff report. And then has also listed the specific development standards for the accessory use of an overnight shelter on page 4 as well. For an interim use permit, we evaluate additional conditions as well, and those start on page 5, so that the zoning ordinance authorizes through an interim use permit through section 537.20 of the code. The applicant is not seeking any exceptions through the zoning ordinance. As previously mentioned, the applicant would be seeking to allow for the shelter essentially from December 4th of this year through December 4th of 2025, and that shelter would operate seasonally from November 20th through May 31st. The applicant is aware of the standard related to public taking and conditions and guarantees as the City Council deems reasonable may be applied. So therefore, staff is recommending approval of the requested interim use permit to allow for an overnight shelter for up to 50 beds within the existing place of assembly, subject to 2 conditions of approval. The first is that just recognizing that seasonal use of the overnight shelter from November 20th through May 31st, and that the interim use permit shall expire no later than December 4th of 2025. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your report, Ms. Sether. I'll see if there are any questions from members of the committee. Anyone? Seeing none, I'm going to proceed to open the public hearing and ask the clerk if there are any speakers in queue. I see a number of speakers in queue. So I would call on each speaker, ask you to provide 2 minutes of testimony, and we're not going to have a buzzer. I would just ask you to keep it to 2 minutes, and I'll start with Dr. Whitley. Please press *6 to unmute. Is Dr. Whitley on the line?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
I thank you so much for all of the community support. I have been participant in the overnight shelter last year with the Elam Strong Tower joint, our joint homeless shelter. Since that time, some of the members of our shelter last year have been placed into apartments and other long-term situations. In fact, about 88% of them, with our follow-up, have been placed into housing of some sort and are not part of the shelter this year. So I want to thank the community. Logan Park neighborhood has come out and supported the encampment. They brought food and blankets and socialization, which is so important. And we vowed to be a very good neighbor. And because of my experience last year, I have addressed things that might have seemed like a neighborhood nuisance. And as you noticed, we supported the encampment and that it was one of the most organized, clean parks of this year's encampments. And we hope to have social services, intend to have social services, to also work on housing and other services for our shelter family as we go through the year, and possibly increase or at least maintain the number of homeless that will be housed at the end of May 31st. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for your work and for your testimony today. The next speaker would be Sue Watlaw Phillips. Ms. Phillips, please press *6 to unmute. And while Sue is trying to do that, the next person would be Kaylee Suhan, followed by Terry Geisden, and then Pastor Becky. Sue, were you able to press *6 to unmute?
Hi, this is Kaylee Suhan.
Okay, we'll take you, Kaylee, while Sue's trying to figure. We'll take Sue too. Just give her a second, and we'll take you, Kaylee, since you're here now. You have 2 minutes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Kaylee Suhan. I live in the Sheridan neighborhood in Northeast Minneapolis, and I've lived in Minneapolis for about 12 years. I was an advocate for the unhoused last year at the shelter, and I will be in charge of daily programming at the shelter this year. And I fully support the shelter being put in the neighborhood again. Like LaTanya said, our family members are really great community members, and we have really started to build foundational relationships that will help these individuals transition out of being homeless. And I absolutely am excited for this opportunity to work with this family again.
Thank you so much for all of your work, Kaylee, and for being on the call today. We'll see if Sue Watlaw Phillips, do we have you? Okay, we'll move on to Terry Geisden.
Hey, I'm here.
Hi, Terry. Please feel free to speak for 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. So I'm Terry Geidison. I live directly across the street from the church, and I've been here for almost 30 years. And my concern isn't so much with the shelter, because I know it's a huge problem that we need to take care of, especially with COVID. But my concern is that the building is in such disrepair. I sent pictures that I took just today. There's large pieces of sheet metal that have come off the tower every time we get a big windstorm, and they're blowing in the wind. The city's been out twice to put a Band-Aid on it. The whole steeple, there's broken windows. I understand it's very unsafe. I live in fear that it's going to fall on my house. But also at the front of it, there's so much disrepair that it concerns me for the people that are there and those of us in the community as well, and for the beautiful building and church that it is. So maybe this is not the right form. I have a little problem with the 5-year part of this thing, you know, maybe 1 or 2 years, I'd be a little more comfortable with a review. And, you know, just the experience I have with them putting in what I was understanding was a temporary air conditioning system, which has been there for 9 years now. It looks horrible. It's noisy. And again, I understand this is a separate issue, but I just want to address the situation of the shape of the building itself.
Thank you, Terry. We'll have Shannon, our staff, address this at the end of the public testimony. Thank you very much for the photos and for being on the call today. Our last speaker is Pastor Becky. Pastor Becky, are you there? And press *6 to unmute, please. We'll see if the tech team knows if Pastor Becky is on the line. If not, Ms. Sethard, can you address some of these building stability issues? I thought you said in your presentation that there would still be some inspections of the building and such. Maybe I got that wrong. Could you repeat that?
Thank you, Chair Goodman. Specific to the residential occupancy that will occur in a newer portion of the building, there was an addition finished in 1990. Those spaces will be required to be inspected, but staff is also aware of some existing conditions with the church building, the historic building, that need to have further addressing as well.
Okay, so it sounds like staff is going to pass on to the appropriate people those issues that need to be addressed. Okay, I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone else on the call today to testify.
I do not believe there are further callers for this item.
Thank you to the clerk. I will close the public hearing, seeing there are no further speakers signed up, and ask Councilmember Reich if he'd like to speak or make a motion on this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and yes, I would. Very familiar with this location and the activities that we're discussing today. I think the highlight of the story is that number of folks that have been successfully transferred from being unhoused to a very temporary situation to on their way. It's such a high percentage. I think it's well above, if we want to call it an industry, well above what we would normally expect for any given population to hit. You know, 50% we celebrate. This is even above that, and it's approaching almost 100%. That means something's working right on the human contact.
Can you hear me?
Well,
keep going, Kevin. The public hearing is closed.
Yeah. The wraparound services, the intentionality, and I think there's an X factor here that might speak to it as well. I don't think we could scientifically prove it, but all the work that LaTonya talked about in terms of making.
This is Pastor Becky. I am here.
Okay, Pastor Becky, we've closed the public hearing and we're about to approve this. So perhaps we should let Councilmember Wright continue.
Yeah, I'm here, but I can't get on the phone.
Okay, Pastor Becky, we can hear you, but the public
hearing. You can hear me.
Right, the public hearing is closed and Councilmember Reich is about to make a motion. So we're going to let him continue with that. I'm sorry.
Okay, bye-bye.
Councilmember Reich.
So as I was saying, and Pastor Becky was certainly a part of this notion of intentional and an active relationship with the geographic community. That partnership, I think, is the sort of X factor in the success story that we're discussing today. And it seems like that partnership will only continue and deepen. Of course, with that, you know, community relationships include the complexity of community. And we want to make sure this effort of being quote unquote good neighbors and also having a good facility is that standard does not get excused either. And so I think we can do both. Continue with the success that we're doing with this population, this very expanded need that we're as a community working through. And of course, continue to have that high standard of a good neighborly presence. And so Terry's observations are correct. We certainly will not excuse those issues because we have such good work going within the building. We will do both. and my commitment is to continue with that. And I believe now that the extra staff attention that's come here in the name of not just the community, but the people within, if it's worth doing, we should do it right. These should be good, safe places for people to be, and no shortcut on the safety of this population should be entertained. And so I think all the good elements are here. In terms of the duration, there's plenty of checkpoints. If there's any non-compliance at any stage, anything can be revisited. But I think this marks out a certain amount of a time mark of certainty around funding, additional partnerships that could be very additional services and resources to the situation. And I think that's meaningful too, knowing that we always have fallback if anything comes outside of the conditions that we will impose today, assuming approval, which I will move, Madam Chair.
Councilmember Reich has moved approval of item number 3. Are there other comments or questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll on item number 3.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Chair Goodman.
Aye.
There's 6 ayes.
That item carries. The motion is approved. We'll move on then to item number 4, which is the short-term rental ordinance. I know Saray is on the line to give a presentation, so I would open the floor to our staff.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Goodman, council members. My name is Saray Garnett-Hofuli, Director of Operations and Engagement for Regulatory Services. I'm here today to present updates to the short-term rentals ordinance. For the remainder of the slides, I will also be using the acronym STR. Next slide, please. When we implemented the initial short-term rental ordinance 3 years ago, the STR model primarily encompassed people renting out a room or their entire homesteaded property for a few days at a time. Over the last few years, we've seen the short-term rental market evolve, especially as STRs have become a business model, both for small property owners as well as commercial endeavors, where a company will rent units for several years exclusively for STR occupancy. In addition to these evolving business models, we've also seen new enforcement tools that have gained wider acceptance, and the city has a better opportunity to develop and assess enforcement on this ordinance. The goals for this ordinance update are threefold. 1, to ensure all residents and visitors staying in an STR unit in Minneapolis are healthy and safe. 2, we're preserving the availability and affordability, affordable housing for low-income residents by limiting the amount of housing that is being taken off the market through STR. And lastly, to address the high number of nuisance complaints originating from short-term rental guests or units. Next slide, please. Over the last 18 months, we've convened an internal cross-departmental working group, which included regulatory services, city attorney's office, business license, zoning, intergovernmental relations, and the assessor's office. We had regular meetings discussing the current ordinance and the evolution of the short-term market locally and throughout Greater Minnesota. We spent a lot of time researching other jurisdictions around the country for a better understanding of ordinance updates and the complex field of regulating STR. After Councilmember Fletcher's initial public meeting to announce this work, we also held meetings with a wide range of developers, small and large business platforms such as Ministay, Sonder, and Airbnb. We also talked to hotels and community members. With COVID-19, we've also had to look at the current landscape and estimate future changes within the market. Following the initial meetings, we developed proposed changes and shared them with all stakeholders. After feedback on the proposal, we drafted the ordinance language, taking into consideration the feedback provided from stakeholder meetings. Next slide.
Wait a second.
Okay, great. On this slide, for each type of STR listings, you can see the current ordinance requirements as well as the proposed changes. The main proposed changes are as follows, and this is a lot, so I'm going to walk through this particular chart. So on the left, currently, if you rent a room, no registration or license is required. And then in the proposal or the proposed, there's no changes. When we go to the next situation, it's a homestead. I have a property, I own my own house or condo, and I want to rent out a room, but I'm going to stay when I open my home to a guest. Short-term rentals will still require the registration, but what we're going to do is add, we're going to ask that post STR information within each dwelling unit or room, list the registration ID on the platform, and limit occupants to 10, regardless of the property size or unit size. So next type of properties that we're going to look at are non-homesteaded units and buildings with less than 20 units. Currently, we require a rental license. What we're proposing is a short-term rental license, and this includes requirement to list license ID on the platform, limit occupants to 10, regardless of the property or unit size, submit a management plan addressing typical concerns and a floor plan, allow one short-term rental unit in addition to the homesteaded property anywhere in the city. The next grouping of properties that we're looking at is non-homesteaded units in buildings with 20 units or more. Again, they will require a license, and it's the same standards as above, but properties must contain the number of units that can be listed on short-term rentals will be limited to 10% within that building. And this is something that we should note. Condos are not included in this requirement. Throughout this ordinance process, we have heard from feedback from residents around some short-term rental units struggling with noise, parking, and trash issues. In order to respond to the important feedback we've received through our engagement process, we will require a management plan for STR licenses that will be submitted with the license. This will be a critical tool as it addresses standards of behaviors and expectations for the property owner and guests, including planning for noise, parking, and trash issues. Staff will work on solidifying the management plan template over the next few months and incorporate specific feedback and concerns that we've heard from stakeholders. The management plans are kept out of the ordinance itself so we can be responsive to changing conditions and limit needing to come back to council for approval to make adjustments. In addition to the management plan, the department has a wide range of tools for rental license enforcement that can be used for property with chronic nuisance or livability issues, including conditions and revocations. The occupancy limit of 10 people is an upper limit and does not mean all properties are allowed 10 people, but rather that large units can have up to 10 people. This limit does not apply to non-STR properties or personal gatherings. Next slide. Over the next 6 months, staff will develop the process, finalize forms, and implementation. We are currently working on updating the STR platform categories and fees to be in line with our associated costs. These will go into effect for the 2021 licenses. We are also looking at working alongside platforms on joint education and outreach about the new proposals. For the ordinance, enforcement will be done on a complaint basis starting on May 1st. This concludes my presentation, and I stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Saray. We'll see if there are any questions from any members of the committee. And I'll note that Councilmember Fletcher has been on the entire call, and he's here for this item in particular. So we'll see if council members have any questions. If not, we're going to proceed to open the public hearing. There's a long queue of people, so I'm going to tell you the 3 in a row, and then we'll move on to the next 3. We'd ask you to state your name and address for the record, and then also to stick to 2 minutes. We have Nicolene Holm, Trent Acuff, and Nathan Royce as the first 3 in that order. So we'll invite Ms. Holm to speak first, please. Please, she might not be on the line. We'll see if Ms. Holm is there. If not, we'll move on to Trent Acuff, followed by Nathan Royce, and then Rachel DeLevy-Ore. Trent Acuff, are you on the line?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Yes, you can be heard, sir.
Thank you, and good afternoon, committee members. Thank you all for your time. My name is Trent Acuff. I'm a managing director with Hines. Hines is a privately owned real estate firm with a global presence in 225 cities worldwide. We have 40 years and 8 million square feet of experience in Minneapolis across office, residential, and retail products. Many of you know my business partner, Bob Pepperly, very well. Unfortunately, Bob is unable to attend today's meeting as he attends a COVID-related memorial service for a family member. But please know that my comments today are echoed by Bob, who has over 30 years of experience in Minneapolis. Hines believes there is an opportunity to improve the STR ordinance proposed by Council Member Fletcher in a way that can spur economic growth and create additional housing units. We ask that the ordinance incorporate additional modifications prior to approval. Most importantly, pivoting away from a one-size-fits-all approach and adding an appropriate variance component. To support this recommendation, I would like to provide context on what Hines is seeing globally and provide an example of how STR can be successfully incorporated into a project.
Mr. Acuff, you have 1 minute left to do all of that. I just want to make it clear.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, as a global firm working on city-defining developments, Hines is having real-time conversations with some of the largest professional services, technology, legal, and financial companies on the future of their real estate needs. And what these firms are looking for is 1, flexibility, and 2, a mixed-use village environment. I would say that short-term rental is a key part of both of these considerations, as STR provides adaptable accommodations for employees, business travelers, customers, and visitors. Further, STR provides vibrancy that significantly benefits the retail and restaurants of the neighborhood and community, which are, again, critical components of what these firms are seeking. Second, the example I'd like to share is one Councilmember Fletcher and many of you are very familiar with, and that's Hines' proposed development, North Loop Green. At North Loop Green, we are purpose building 96 short-term rental units, which are located on separate floors with a separate check-in lobby. These STR units are in addition to North Loop Green and not in lieu of other market rate units. We've made this part of our discussions with the neighborhood, HPC, and Planning Commission. Under the current proposed ordinance with no variance component, there would be no opportunity for a project like North Loop Green to add this key STR element. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I will note Hines did submit a letter for the record also. We'll call on Nathan Royce, followed by Rachel DeLevy-Ore, and then Christine Eid. Mr. Royce, are you on the line? Nathan Royce, if you'd like to press *6. Followed by Rachel DeLevy-Ore. Rachel, are you on the line?
Yes.
Please go ahead, ma'am.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, ma'am. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chair Goodman, council members. My name is Rachel DeLevy-Ore, and I'm with the Airbnb Public Policy team. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. Airbnb operates in over 220 countries and regions around the world. As the saying goes, all politics is local. We at Airbnb recognize the importance of communities creating regulations which support the needs of their citizens, and we are partners in supporting clear, common sense regulations in jurisdictions around the globe. Tourism is among one of the hardest hit industries due to the global pandemic, and that is even more true in urban areas such as Minneapolis. Empowering residents to earn alternative sources of income through utilizing their homes is more important than ever. We've heard from people throughout the city about the critical role hosting plays in their lives, and we want to be sure hosting is still an accessible option for residents. Understanding that Minneapolis has a need to update how it regulates short-term rentals, we would like to urge the city to provide clarity on a few points. In our experience, clear and simple systems are those with the highest rates of compliance, and we want to be partners in achieving that. The proposed ordinance requires hosts operating short-term rentals outside of their primary residence to inform their neighbors about this activity. We know being a good neighbor is critical. However, neighbor notification is difficult, both to enact and to enforce. Alternatively, communities have been successful in requiring short-term rental hosts to attest to a good neighbor policy. Additionally, we would seek clarity on understanding the proposed annual license fee for non-homestead properties, as it is important to hosts to know their financial obligations. We would also like to understand the proposed platform license fees for operators such as Airbnb to ensure we can meet our obligations to the city. Finally, we would like to urge the city to reconsider the proposal to restrict the number of short-term rentals in buildings with more than 20 units. These restrictions are arbitrary and deny equal opportunity for those who wish to participate in the home sharing industry. Limiting residents from hosting opportunities merely because of where their homes are located is unfair. I welcome the opportunity to discuss these matters with you and your colleagues. Further, I hope we can find ways to work together on these issues that matter most to Minneapolis. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll have Christine Eid followed by Tram Hoying and then Andrew Falstrom. Christine, are you there? Press *6 to unmute.
Good afternoon. This is Nathan Royce. I was not able to join just now. Can I jump in?
Nope. Now we're going to take Christine Eid and then we'll take you after that, Mr. Rice.
Thank you.
Ms. Eid, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Christine Eid. I'm an attorney at Stinson and I'm here representing Sonder. First, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today and to provide our input on the proposed ordinance. I want to thank staff for its hard work in developing this ordinance and also the committee for your leadership in Minneapolis during these difficult times. I've been working with Sonder for over 2 years now and have witnessed their hard work and efforts in understanding the needs of the community and operating in a manner that respects the policies of the council. Sonder is in support of informed and targeted regulations to STRs that would allow innovative and responsible companies like Sonder thrive while mitigating the damage that an irresponsible operator that's not invested in the community may have. I'm here to state Sonder's position specifically with respect to the status of its continued operations after the proposed ordinance goes into effect and to resolve any confusion there is on that point. The city cannot exercise its licensing and zoning powers to prohibit Sonder's operations under its existing leases. This is not an ask, it's the law. As outlined in my letter, Sonder has been lawfully operating for nearly 2 years in the city, and prior to entering the market, Sonder met with city staff and leadership. Sonder subsequently invested substantial resources in entering into leases, which are legally binding contracts and provide Sonder with a property interest in these buildings. Not only does Sonder have a property interest, but the landlords that are also party to these contracts have a property interest that's at stake. Our ask is that the city expressly acknowledge in the ordinance that an exception on the 10% threshold for existing operators of STRs. This should not be something that should be resolved in litigation. It should be something that is plainly stated in the ordinance. And with that, I thank you and am available for questions.
Thank you for your time. We'll now move on to Nathan Royce, followed by Tram Hang, and then Andrew Fulstrom.
This is Nathan Royce. Thank you for your time. My address is 728 North 3rd Street, number 201 in Minneapolis. I am a 20-year Minneapolis resident. I also serve as the president of the Sable Homeowner Association. Sable is a condo building focused on the short-term rental market in the North Loop. And I want to say thank you to Council Member Fletcher and his team for listening to a lot of feedback provided by our community, which provides 57 units of short-term rental housing in the North Loop, as I said. Now, I think there are a number of good things in this ordinance change, including license number and advertisements, emergency phone number, neighbor notification, and the management plan. And I understand the reason of wanting to protect housing and affordable housing in Minneapolis. However, as a real estate broker for 17 years, primarily working in Minneapolis, I've also seen how short-term rentals can benefit the community. And I have a real concern about the 1+1 rule. That is the homestead plus one other unit or housing unit in Minneapolis. There are good property managers out there that are providing this valued form of housing. We're seeing.
Welcome. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Goodman and council members. Thanks for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Tram Huang at 2525 East Franklin Avenue. I'm a policy advocate at the Alliance and a member of the Make Homes Happen Coalition. I'm here to share my organization's support for the short-term rental ordinance proposed today. Not only is it common sense regulation that ensures the health and safety of short-term rental occupants and nearby neighbors, it's also an important housing justice issue. When our city has proclaimed over and over again its commitment to racial equity, we have to acknowledge that housing instability and homelessness are a burden overwhelmingly carried by people of color. The racial equity impact analysis that the city performed for this ordinance shows that there are clear disparate impacts across racial groups when it comes to STRs. Renters who are majority BIPOC are more negatively impacted by short-term rental properties due to decreased housing availability, while property owners who are majority white due to our vast homeownership gap benefit from the fact that short-term rentals are more profitable than long-term rentals. Who benefits matters, and who builds wealth in our communities matters. When our city is home to hundreds of people living outside in tents and freezing temperatures, we have to prioritize residents' needs for a home over individuals or investment companies' desires to commodify their extra housing for profit. The racial equity impact analysis also states that property owners who convert their short-term rentals back to long-term rentals might see a decreased return on their properties. But let's be clear, decreased return on investment is not comparable to homelessness and housing instability. We must choose people over profit. In a time of scarce housing investment from other levels of government and fiscal uncertainty, revenue neutral policies like this are critical to keeping housing available to Minneapolis residents. In this time especially, we know that a house is not just a home. Home is school, work, and public health defense against the pandemic. We cannot let homes sit empty when we know there's a lack of supply. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll have Andrew Falstrom, followed by Tom Forsyth and Alyssa Mulher.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Falstrom, and I actually live right here between the site of George Floyd's murder and the enormous homeless encampment that found sanctuary this summer in Powderhen Park. I'm not a corporate bellyacre. 2 houses down from my home is a new construction single-family home built on land that was tax forfeited to Hennepin County to steward. In May of this year, that single-family home sold for over $500,000, a price that would have been inconceivable 5 years ago when it was built. As of May, where families once lived, now exists no neighbor. It's an Airbnb, one of a few being rented out under one account or host on their website. My neighbors and I have watched with disgust and dismay as luxury cars came and went all summer, while other members of my community lived in tents in the park. Once a home is pulled off of being affordable for a family stability, it never comes back in the same way into true service to our community. There's no path or incentive for it to come back to its needed use for long-term residents. Buildings that were once affordable homes generate far too much wealth for those who have created a corporate business model of buying up more housing than they themselves need and renting it back to us or others of more means to extract the greatest profit. Our neighbors are still sleeping in parks along the Greenway during a pandemic, and it's only getting worse. The county is scaling back their hotel bed programs. An uncountable number of renters and homeowners are going into deep debt just to pay their rented mortgages after losing their jobs, with very little hope of ever clawing themselves out of COVID-induced debt. Housing is a fundamental basic need. Our communities rise and fall on access to housing. It's clear that we are well past the point of needing serious and severe regulation and intervention in the accelerating, highly speculative, and painfully extractive housing market forces that have taken homes out of our neighborhoods. This committee and the council must do everything in your power, including this change, a tenant-first opportunity to purchase, and so much more, to limit the market's ability to cause us more harm and extract profit while taking homes out of circulation. Corporations and LLCs are not people. As a city, we have to do better. We have to return our homes and neighborhoods to our long-term community and families. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. We'll move on to Tom Forsyth, followed by Alyssa Mulher and Sharon Cohen.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Tom Forsyth. I'm a resident of Ward 3. We have been working on this issue for many, many months as condo boards and residents in the Mill District. I actually thank the council and Councilmember Fletcher for moving forward with this. I did have questions related to it. One of those was answered by the attorney for Sonder, who threatened the city with litigation if they were not grandfathered or somehow granted a variance. Our question was whether or not their 25 of 122 units at the vicinity 205 Park would be under this ordinance or grandfathered in some way. That's 20.5% of the units in the building. down from the original 94, which was the lease that was signed in the beginning. So we now have heard Sonder threaten us with litigation on this point. I assume that they are therefore not grandfathered. I hope they are not. This ordinance should apply to them in particular. The two other points I'd like to make is 50 feet of notification would mean that a building across Washington Avenue would not be notified. Washington Avenue is 64 feet wide. From 205 Park, that wouldn't include any neighbor even across the street. It should be farther. And I would like to encourage you to, within this ordinance, apply equal taxation to what hotels pay for all large operators of short-term rentals. Currently, hotels pay 14.025% sales tax and lodging tax in Minneapolis. Sonder, across the street at 205 Park, pays 11.3%. That really isn't smart. We should not undercut our whole hotel industry, and we should charge the large operators of short-term rentals as if they are hotels, because in fact, that is what they are operating. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. We'll move on to Alyssa Mulhare, followed by Sharon Cohn, and then Melissa Hauer. Hauer. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Hi there. My name is, thank you, Councilmember Goodman, for providing me an opportunity to speak today. I'm Elisa Mulhare, resident of over 25 years of Minneapolis and currently live in Ward 3. I'm general manager for Sonder, an accommodations provider that offers furnished stays from a few days to a year in multiple locations across Minneapolis. We provide spaces for people where they can cook, work, clean their clothes, and live in for days, weeks, and months at a time. Every day I witness firsthand how live and stay needs are evolving, especially during these extreme uncertain times, and how relevant and needed our accommodation type is, but is not properly being addressed with this ordinance. We are a solution that falls between traditional hotel rooms that only provide conducive environment for a few days and versus a long-term apartment market that requires long leases and high upfront costs for deposits and furnishing. Our accommodation type is needed, and even and especially during COVID. We average 80% occupancy since May, with our guests staying an average of 15 days, and over 60% of our book nights are people that stay with us for well over 30 days. We support so many people with so many needs. Locals needing flexible housing, such as Michelle, a resident of Councilmember Reich's ward that lost everything in a fire, and we supported her to help her pick up her pieces and even help her through a hip surgery. We support longer-term business travelers, such as Michael, who launched a new business here and stayed with us for days and weeks at a time. We provide support for people staying for short and long periods of time to be near their family, hospital patients and their loved ones, like the majority of our guests staying with us next to the Children's Hospital that need to be close to their children in long-term care, and first responders and health providers, like we have near, so they can walk to HCMC and be close to when emergencies call. If this ordinance passes as is, it will terminate our ability to provide short-term rental operations that are best in class, a standard that Councilmember Fletcher has publicly acknowledged we provide. It will result in us terminating employees, most of which represent minorities, and we pay living wages. It would put housekeeping companies.
Your timing is up. Sure. I thought maybe I could catch you at the end of a sentence, but that was too hard. Thank you for your testimony. We'll hear from Sharon Cohen, followed by Melissa Hauer.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, ma'am.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for the time here to speak. My name is Sharon Cohn, and I represent Solaris, the developer and owner of Second and Second, the recently completed multifamily project in the heart of the Northland. During the development stage of our project that began over 3 years ago, we partnered with Sonder to operate their short-term rental program over 2 dedicated floors of our building. This partnership was entered into and construction completed under the premise that this was an allowable and viable use within the current zoning regulations. A substantial investment was made into the building to accommodate their programming requirements. We spent months creating a partnership between ourselves, Sonder, and Greystar to ensure seamless building operations for both our long-term residents and Sonder guests. It was imperative to us that Sonder play a significant role in the operations of our project, providing concierge, hospitality, and security services to all of the building occupants. It has been a very successful endeavor with nothing but positive experiences for both Sonder guests and our multifamily tenants to date. Upon completion of construction in March of 2020, We were immediately impacted by COVID, followed by the bouts of civil unrest in Minneapolis. The fabric of the city changed in a heartbeat. Offices vacated, retail and restaurants shuttered, streets emptied. Our lease up of the residential and commercial had come to a halt and continues this way today. If it were not for Sonder, our project would be mostly vacant and at risk of folding. Sonder provided a flexible housing solution for people in need and maintained a high occupancy at a time when the world stood still. Sonder's guests bring vibrancy to the building, vibrancy to the neighborhood, money to the surrounding retail and dining establishments, all of whom are struggling to survive. Sonder has allowed us to keep people employed. You know, we continue to struggle through these difficult times to attract residents back to the city. If grandfathering is not considered within this ordinance, not only will our project be at stake, but the neighboring community will be further devastated during these times. We urge you to acknowledge that we've been operating as a legal conforming use and ensure we have the right to continue the current STR operations. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Our last speaker is Melissa, who I've pronounced her name incorrectly 3 times now, so I won't do that again. Melissa, are you on the line?
Hi, yes.
Melissa,
hello, this is Melissa. Can you hear me?
We can, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, yes. My name is Melissa Hoyer, and I'm the Director of Public Policy at Sonder and support Minneapolis in its compliance and government relations work. I want to thank the Madam Chair of the committee and the members of the committee for the time and opportunity to speak. You know, in my role in supporting all of Sonder's North American markets, Minneapolis has always been an outlier among other Sonder cities for a few reasons. The average length of stay has always been twice that of our other cities. It has amongst the highest number of repeat guests despite deep seasonality of Minneapolis, and has significantly more information about the types of guests that choose to stay with us based on the information they share with us in their reviews. We've attributed much of this unique profile of Minneapolis as a city. It is home to several major corporate headquarters, some of the best hospitals and medical treatment facilities in the world, and has become a notable cultural destination with top-rated restaurants, theater, and music experiences, as well as sporting events. Sonder's success in Minneapolis is due in large part to the traveler demand for a lodging offering that can comfortably accommodate longer stays. In the COVID pandemic, we've found that we are providing an accessible, flexible living option for the various needs that are unique to these times, quarantines and social distancing, as well as those who may find themselves with a lack of financial liquidity, employment stability, and the general long-term certainty needed to secure traditional leases. In light of these factors, both pre-pandemic and in the midst of a second wave of new cases, it is difficult to ascertain why the city is moving forward now with hugely impactful regulatory changes, and with that, why these changes in particular. When most cities have amended their existing STR regulations to enhance restrictions, as Minneapolis is doing now, their city planning departments have conducted extensive research to develop public policy recommendations backed by hard data and published studies, often 150 plus pages in review, to share their findings and justifications with the public. With density caps as restrictive as 10%, most cities have caps set them at 25%, and a refusal to formally acknowledge legal non-conforming use rights of existing STRs in compliance with current city regulations, it begs the question, where is the data to support these policies? I imagine that these means that my time's up.
Yeah, thank you very much for your testimony. I'll note that Sonder has provided a letter to everyone on the council for the record also. I'll ask the clerk if there is anyone else on the line in queue to speak to this item.
No further speakers registered for item 4.
I'll then go ahead and close the public hearing, and then I will invite members of the committee to speak or ask if Councilmember Fletcher would like to say a few words. I also have an amendment I'll bring forward, but I'll first call on Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Goodman, for giving me the opportunity to speak, and thank you to everyone who testified and who participated in the extensive community engagement and community stakeholder and industry stakeholder meetings that we've held over the last 18 months. I'll note that this ordinance really comes in the spirit of solving problems for our housing industry. It is not in the spirit of solving problems for a short-term rental industry. We did not really set out to create a vibrant or thriving short-term rental industry as much as to figure out how do we maintain a vibrant and thriving housing stock. And then to the extent that short-term rental fits into that scheme, we want to allow that and facilitate it, and also make sure that we're properly regulating it and charging fees such that it pays for itself and make this work for the city. So our goal is really to preserve housing. Our goal is really to preserve the incentives that we've been trying to create to get developers to look at affordable housing. That we know that there's been some argument around the creation of about how short-term rental facilitates financing for housing because it helps with market absorption. And what I will say is there is no problem with market absorption if we're building an affordable component to projects, that there's a huge wait list for affordable housing. And so we know exactly how to get housing absorbed. And we're really trying in policy to steer everybody in that direction. And as much as possible, I think that's where we've been prioritizing. So that being said, I think we've come to a place where we have created an opportunity for people to continue to operate within a set of rules that work for us, that don't take too much housing off of the market, that will be regulated in a way that allows us to respond to complaints as they arise and hopefully to prevent complaints in the first place through a responsible management plan. And ultimately to make this work for everybody involved. So I'm really excited about the work. I think there's significant work ahead as Saray told us that we'll be working on, especially on the rules process around management plans to define really what the best practices are that we're going to expect of hosts and operators so that this happens in a responsible framework, and really appreciate the work that everybody, particularly Director Keller and Andrew Wozniak and Saray put into this. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of this proposal, and I know that there's still work ahead, both with CPED and as we consider the fees and the rulemaking process to get to implementation. But appreciate everybody's thinking on this, and you know, I'll note that there was some a disagreement in the public testimony around the notion of grandfathering, and I just want to you know, say for the record my perspective on that, which is that our zoning zoned this for housing, and there's nothing in our zoning that currently signals that it's appropriate for short-term rental. That's been a licensing issue, that we're going to change the terms of that licensing, and I think that's an appropriate thing for us to do. So I'm not particularly interested in the grandfathering conversation. I think that it's time for us to update our rules and to change the way that we operate this industry. And I think that now, while we're in a pandemic and there are fewer people participating in this industry, is the right time to make these changes before the industry shifts again as things come back. So thanks everybody for your careful consideration of this. I appreciate the work that the committee has ahead, and I know that there's more discussion to follow, so I'll let you get to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fletcher. I'll see if anyone else on the committee has a comment or a question or a motion. I have an amendment that I would make to the main motion. So I think I will first move approval of the ordinance as drafted by staff. And then I have an amendment that I have brought forward. It's in the chat as a method to distribute to members of the committee. Many of you know that buildings with fewer than 20 units, no owner or licensee shall have an interest in more than one short-term dwelling unit. My amendment would say, except in homesteaded duplexes with approved ADUs and homesteaded triplexes where the homestead owner may operate the non-homesteaded unit or units as licensed as short-term rental dwelling units in compliance with all applicable provisions of the code. What this amendment does is it would allow those who live in their own unit and rent one of two in a duplex could rent 2 of 3 in a triplex, as long as it's owner occupied, as well as the short-term rental is managed by the owner occupant. So it's to increase the number from 1 to 2 in owner occupied homestead homes. This has nothing to do with the larger building issue at all. So I will make that motion on that amendment to the main motion. Are there comments or questions with regard to that motion? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll on the amendment.
Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Osmond,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Chair Goodman.
Aye.
There's 6 ayes.
So the main motion is in front of us as amended. Are there further comments or questions? Discussion from anyone on the committee? Seeing none, I'll move approval of the main motion as authored by Councilmember Fletcher and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Reich,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Osmond,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Chair Goodman.
Aye.
There's 6 ayes.
That item has been approved. We'll move on to item number 5. This is the West Broadway Curve Affordable Housing Project. There are 2 pieces to this. Item 5, which is the bond issuance, and item 6, which is the tax increment financing plan. The item on number 5, which is the bonds, has been noticed for a public hearing today, but staff has asked to continue this item for till February 2nd. But before I make that motion, I want to open the public hearing and ask the clerk if there are any speakers in queue on item number 5, which is the bond issuance. Looks like we have Charles Burdick, who would like to speak on item number 5. We're not going to take a staff presentation on item 5, but Mr. Burdick, you are welcome to speak. So I will open the public hearing on item number 5 and invite you to press *6 to unmute and speak to the issue of affordable housing entitlement bonds for the West Broadway Curve. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you. I'm here to speak in support of the project and provide answers to any questions. I'll wait till the next item. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further speakers in the queue, I'm going to close the public hearing and move to postpone till February 2nd, item number 5, again, the West Broadway Curve bond issuance. I will ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion to postpone.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon. Councilmember Gordon. Osmond.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Chair Goodman.
Aye.
And Councilmember Gordon. There are 5 ayes.
That item has been continued until February 2nd. Then we'll move on to our last regular public hearing, which is item number 6. This is approving the tax increment financing plan for the West Broadway Curve, passage of the pay-as-you-go note, and authorizing the redevelopment contract. I note that Tiffany Glasper is on the line and would invite her to give a presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, members of the committee. My name is Tiffany Glasper. I am a senior project coordinator in the residential finance division at CPED. The West Broadway West Building project, also known as West Broadway Curve 2, is a 92-unit new construction project proposed for West Broadway Avenue between Knox and Newton Avenues North along what is commonly known as the Curve. The project is in the Jordan neighborhood in Ward 5, approximately 2 blocks east of the Penn Broadway intersection. The project will feature a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, affordable at 50%, 60%, and 80% AMI. The units are in 2 distinctly separate but related components: a single apartment building with 72 units and a townhome complex with 20 units. The project will also include underground parking, an integrated transit stop, public art, green spaces, and a greenway through the site connecting northward to Cottage Park. The townhome units have been thoughtfully designed to include walk-ups fronting on West Broadway for more eyes on the street. The project will turn 20 city-owned, vacant, and underutilized parcels into a new community resource. Sherman Associates has established West Broadway Limited Partnership, and they are requesting $1,516,000 in tax increment financing to support the project. The total development costs for the project are currently estimated at just under $32 million. Developer participation in the project includes $820,975 in deferred developer fee. The total developer fee is $2,784,515, which is in compliance with the city's developer fee guidelines. To date, more than 20 million in sources have been secured for the project. The financial details should be included in the project data worksheet that is attached to your copy of the staff report. The developer has requested pay-as-you-go TIF assistance from the city to help pay for eligible construction costs. The West Broadway Curve Tax Increment Financing Plan establishes a new housing TIF district, and pending approval, the city will issue a pay-as-you-go tax increment note in the amount of $1,516,000 to the project. The pay-go note does not obligate the city to make any payments to the note holder beyond 90% of the increment generated by the project. The West Broadway Curve TIF plan is also attached to your report and provides a detailed breakdown of how the increment will be distributed and used. As required by state statute, the West Broadway Curve Tax Increment Financing Plan was transmitted for the required 45-day review to Hennepin County, the Minneapolis School Board, City Planning Commission, the Jordan Area Community Council, area business associations, and other interested parties on October 1st, 2020. As of the writing of the report, no public comments had been received regarding the tax increment financing plan. The tax increment redevelopment contract requires the developer to deliver 92 units of affordable housing within 18 months of closing, along with the additional provisions that are outlined in your report. The project has also received an award from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in the amount of $1,350,000 and an award from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund contingency pool in the amount of $650,000. The developer will also be submitting an application for tax-exempt housing revenue entitlement bonds, which will be the subject of a future staff report along with a land sale. Staff are recommending approval today of the West Broadway Curve Tax Increment Financing Plan. I'm happy to field any questions if you like.
Are there any questions for Ms. Glasper on her report on item number 6? Seeing none, thank you so much for your report. All of the good projects get you, Tiffany, so I'm really happy and proud you're still working with us and doing such incredible work. Every affordable housing project that is meaningful has gone through your hands. They're all meaningful, but the ones you've worked on have been some of the longest and the hardest to do, and I am grateful for your service. Thank you for being on the call today.
Thank you, Councilman Goodman.
We will open the public hearing and ask if there are any speakers in the queue. I can see that the previous speaker, Mr. Burdick, is on the call, as is Mr. Sherman. I'd invite either of you to press *6 to unmute. You have 2 minutes.
Madam Chair and council members, this is George Sherman with Sherman Associates, and thank you for your continued commitment to affordable housing in a better city. Sherman Associates has been involved in developing affordable housing in Minneapolis for over 41 years. We actually started our affordable housing efforts up in West Broadway in 1979. I'm a long-term resident of the city and have personally made a commitment to making an impact on the city and providing quality housing and community impacts everywhere we can. As you heard, this is a project that is unique. We are providing some large family units, 20 townhome units that can be afforded up to 80% of the median income. There's been a shortage of large family housing and a shortage of the housing between 50 and 60% and 80% in North Minneapolis. We are also delivering 72 apartments affordable between 50 and 60%. In this time of great need of affordable housing, this represents 92 affordable housing units in an area that has been greatly impacted by both racial equity matters and by the recent riots in North Minneapolis and South Minneapolis. This project is part of the Rebuild West Broadway that we're committed to, including the commercial corridor that we're so actively involved in. A conversation has come up about our long-term commitment to housing, and we very much have that as forefront. This project, we've committed to over 40 years of affordable housing. That's way beyond what is the normal 15 to 30 years, but we'll probably keep it affordable beyond that. It is our desire that our housing stock in Minneapolis be the highest quality and be affordable. And I think we do a very good job with that. We have also raised money on this project from Hennepin County and for cleanup, environmental cleanup, which the site has a significant amount, and for transit orientation housing, and from the Metro Council Livability Fund. We think this meets a high demand for the North Minneapolis and for affordable housing throughout the city. And we're committed to providing a quality long-term ownership to this project to make sure that it stays as an asset for the city and the community. Thank you very much, Madam and Council members.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Sherman. I'll see if Mr. Burdick has anything he'd like to add, or we can move forward. Seeing no further comments and no other speakers in queue, I will close the public hearing and call on Councilmember Ellison.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Alexis Penny here. I wanted to speak on behalf of item number 6.
Penny, hang on a sec.
Sorry about that.
I'm just trying to check in with the clerk. We have Mr. Penny on the line. Is that lined up correctly?
We don't have Mr. Penny as having registered for item 6.
Okay, I'm new to this in terms of, do you need to be registered in order to testify? It seems to me he's on the line and he figured it out, so we probably could give him 2 minutes. We'll figure that out for the next meeting, but without objection, I'm going to ask Mr. Penny to have 2 minutes, please. Go ahead, Mr. Penny.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your deference. And I want to say thank you to everyone for their time. And I'm speaking on the matter of item 6, which is the Broadway curve, the tax increment financing funding. And I wanted to speak in support of affordable housing, but also against the tax increment financing mechanism. Specifically, I just wanted to put it on everyone's radar that this development project has been slated to happen since 2015, and obviously that's been about 5 years now. And right now we're moving forward on this project, which is great news. Obviously, we have between 50 and 80% EMI, but the problem is that the question is here is like, why is it that Sherman and Associates felt the need to then move forward 5 years later on this project once they felt they could secure tax increment financing? Because it seems like that is a good way for them to recoup their development cost for this project, which for them obviously sounds fantastic. But in terms of the public services that residents would receive through the property tax levied on this site, that will essentially then go to the developer, begs the question, who truly benefits? And benefits and outcomes really matter. I know that one of our goals with this project is to afford quality state of life for everybody. And so I want to make sure that if we're really doing that today, that we're asking where is this money going, and truly who's truly benefiting it from it. As a Northside resident and a person that lives in Jordan area, a lot of my colleagues and people that live around me, my neighbors, we live in we make about $35,000 annually in terms of income. And in terms of affording places that are 50 and 80% AMI, we don't actually even have the income to afford these housing units, essentially. And so I just want to make sure that if we're truly trying to reach the greatest outcomes here, that we're not doing it on the backs of the residents that live here currently. Thank you for your time, and I really appreciate it again.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I will then go ahead and close the public hearing, which I think I had already done, and that ask Councilmember Ellison to speak, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, the person who just gave testimony, Mr. Penny, I do appreciate both George and Alexis coming to give their testimony. This project predates myself, and it has been 5 years. And I asked our staff about that, like what took so long in this project. I'm sure Mr. Sherman could maybe speak for himself, but my understanding is that in short, there were some hurdles to overcome on this project. And while I think that there may be plenty of valid lessons or valid questions about why it took so long, I think once we're getting here and we're looking at, we talked about benefit, or the question of benefit was brought up. Once we're getting kind of to the end of the road here, and I do think that the activation of this currently vacant site and the level of affordability, and not just the level of affordability, but the nature of the affordability really is going to be a benefit to the community. I have a lot of criticisms about how we've done, about how not we, but we as a country, not we as a city, but we as a country do affordable housing. They're slightly philosophical, but beforehand, I think that we've been in this situation where we either have to pick concentrating affordability or unmitigated gentrification. And I feel like by sort of staggering the affordability from 50, 60 to 80, it gives us a little bit of a third option here. And so I think when the TIF is going to go towards supporting the affordability, the question of where does the money go was brought up. And I think that the TIF goes towards securing the affordability so that we can have these sites be at 50 and 60 and 80%. And so I think that it's a net benefit to the community. I think there are a lot of valid critiques or questions to be asked, but in this case, I think that we have a good project that I'm happy to move forward with. So with that comment, I'm happy to move approval of this item, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Ellison. Councilmember Ellison has moved approval. Are there further comments or questions on that motion? I just want to take a moment to concur with Councilmember Ellison with regard to the tax increment being used for affordability. As someone who almost never would support tax increment, I have been open to it on affordable housing projects as it is a way to provide affordability. I almost, you like open the door for me to be against it since there are very few TIF projects that I would support, but this is one of them, primarily due to its location, the importance of development on West Broadway, and most importantly, income in the project. Seeing no further comments from members of the committee, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Chair Goodman.
Aye.
There's 6 ayes.
That item is approved. Thank you to everyone who worked on that. We'll then move on to our quasi-judicial public hearings, starting with item number 7, which is a conditional use permit and variance appeal by Karen Winkler for the property at 4207 Nicollet Avenue. I would invite Ms. Dvorak to give her staff report.
Good afternoon, Chair Goodman, council members. This is an appeal by Karen Winkler for the project at 4207 Nicollet Avenue. The site is zoned C2. The future land use guidance for the site is corridor mixed use. Nicollet Avenue is a goods and services corridor, and the built form guidance for the site is corridor 6. Next slide, please. The site is surrounded by residential developments of varying densities, and a public park is located directly north of the site. There are also small-scale commercial uses scattered along Nicollet Avenue, and the site is located in the Kingfield neighborhood. The applicant is proposing to construct a new 5-story, 82-unit residential building on the site. There would be enclosed parking on the site and access from the public alley. Next slide, please. The project requires a conditional use permit to increase the height of the building from 4 stories or 56 feet to 5 stories or 57 feet. The height limitation in the C2 district is 4 stories, 56 feet.
Anyways, as I say, you can see that happens with the budget committee where people might be looking online and they're like, yeah, I want to do that too or something. And then,
I just
yesterday.
I want to note to the clerk that
Somewhere it got close.
There we go. Thank you. The building that the applicant is proposing to construct will be 5 stories or 57 feet. So the overall height in terms of feet is only 1 foot taller than what is allowed currently in this zoning district. The building does step down to 4 stories in height on the south side of the building as it approaches the most immediate residential neighbor. The existing buildings located along this block in Nicollet Avenue range in height from 1 to 2.5 stories. While the proposed building will be taller than any of the existing buildings on the block, the development will improve the urban character of the area, replacing the existing 1-story commercial building with a higher density residential building. The proposed height of the building is in conformance with the policy guidance for properties located in the Corridor 6 built form district, which calls for building heights between 2 and 6 stories. The proposed building will be separated from surrounding uses on 3 sides by public rights of way. There's a multiple family residential building immediately to the south of the development, and there will be over 17 feet of open space between the 2 buildings. The proposed 5-story building will not impede access to light and air for surrounding properties, nor shadow any one property all day, as the shadows will move east to west as expected. So surrounding properties would not be continually shadowed. The project also requires a variance to increase the floor area ratio from 2.04 to 3.82. Given the lot size, the maximum amount of development that is allowed as of right is approximately 32,000 square feet of development, and the applicant is proposing a building that is approximately 60,000 square feet in size. The built form guidance for the site is Corridor 6 again, which allows buildings up to 6 stories. The proposed development will be the largest building in the immediate area. However, the site is located along Nicollet Avenue, which is a designated goods and services corridor. And the built form guidance for the site is Corridor 6, which calls for buildings up to 6 stories in height. These features encourage high density mixed use development. The increase in the FAR would allow for a development that is consistent with adopted city policies. Next slide, please. A parking variance is required for the development from 41 spaces down to 37 spaces. Practical difficulties exist in complying with the ordinance because of circumstances unique to the property. The site is less than 16,000 square feet in size. The applicant has indicated that the footprint of the building was maximized in order to accommodate as many enclosed parking spaces on the site as possible while still providing active functions along the street sides of the building. The site is located along Nicollet Avenue, which is a high-frequency transit route. The site is also located within walking distance of many commercial businesses and a public park. The proposed variance is reasonable in these circumstances and is in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. It is consistent with Minneapolis 2040 comprehensive plan policies that encourage alternative modes of travel and elimination of parking requirements altogether. In addition to the 37 parking spaces provided on site, there will be 74 bicycle parking spaces provided. Next slide, please. There are 2 setback variances required for the development. The first is to reduce the front yard setback from the required 15 feet for the first 25 feet north of that south interior property line to 23 feet for the building and to 17 feet for an air intake vent. Practical difficulties exist in complying with the ordinance because of circumstances unique to the property. The proposed building will be located 2 feet into the required front yard. This portion of the building will be located 28 feet from the adjacent residential building to the south. The commercial buildings on the south end of the block are all located up to the front property line. The air intake vent, while being located 8 feet into the required yard, will only project out of the ground by approximately 1 foot. The air intake vent is required to be located in this corner of the site for ventilation purposes. The proposed setbacks are reasonable as they will be compatible with surrounding development and will not create conflicts with surrounding properties or uses. The placement of the building will not interfere with access to adequate light, air, and open space for surrounding uses. The effect of the yard variance is along the street frontage on the pedestrian experience is mitigated through variation of the building's setbacks to articulate the facades, incorporation of ground level and upper level stepbacks, and incorporation of entrance landings along Nicollet Avenue. The development will replace the existing 1-story commercial building with parking between it and the front property line along Nicollet Avenue. The pedestrian experience will be enhanced by the development, including improvements to be made to the public sidewalk and boulevards. The proposed setback serves the intent of the ordinance as the city's land use policies. The last variance that is being appealed for the development is a variance to reduce that south interior side yard setback from 13 feet to 5 feet for the entrance landings, stairs, and mechanical equipment. As you can note, the building itself is not located in that required yard. Practical difficulties exist in complying with the ordinance because of circumstances unique to the property. There will be 3 entrance landings measuring 40 square feet with stairs 8 feet wide located in the required yard, entrance landings that are 16 square feet in size, and stairs that are 4 feet in width are permitted obstructions in the required yard. The applicant is proposing to increase the size of the entrance landings and the width of the stairs to allow more space for those entering and exiting those units. The proposed mechanical equipment will be located towards the rear of the site. Given the grades, it will be located at the lower elevation of the site and will not be located immediately adjacent to the existing residential building to the south. The proposed setbacks are reasonable as they will be compatible with surrounding development and will not create conflicts with surrounding properties or uses. The placement of the entrance landings, stairs, and mechanical equipment will not interfere with access to adequate light, air, and open space for surrounding uses. The proposed setbacks serve the intent of the ordinance and the city's land use policies. And I am here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dvorak, for this report. Are there any questions for Ms. Dvorak? Seeing none, I'll proceed to open a public hearing. This type of hearing would give the appellant the opportunity to make their case first. Is Karen Winkler or a representative of Karen Winkler on the call today? I will assume, I see Karen on the call and I see Mr. Keene on the call. I would invite you to speak and give you 10 minutes.
Thank you. This is Karen Winkler. I've been thinking a lot about all the building and growth that I've witnessed in the city over the past few years. And I've reviewed some of the approved variances and conditional use permits that are online and available for everyone. And these are approved variances and conditional use permits over the objections and appeals of the citizens. And I have to wonder who the zoning board and city council is actually working for. I don't know if any of you even know this corner or have viewed where this building is going to go. But part of the reason that I love Minneapolis is because there are quirky sites like the current building all over the city. Especially, I've noticed since I've started walking in my neighborhoods, because I haven't been able to find any other workouts available. And quirky little corners are everywhere in our city, and it's what makes it charming, and it makes it unique. So it's very disheartening when I hear people talk about enhanced by development and improve the urban character, because right now we have really good urban character. All you have to do is walk the city streets. I've been really thoughtful about what I wanted to say, because I understand that change is the only constant, and that in the Twin Cities, things change often, and restaurants especially come and go. But Curran's, which has been a neighborhood staple for over 70 years, is going the way of other quirky restaurants. It didn't have great food or decor, I know that. No one went there for great coffee, but it was a landmark that helped define the neighborhood. The business at the corner of Nicollet and 42nd Street is really going to be missed. It was unique to the neighborhood. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. Talk about the neighborhood and what's best for the residents who live here. The variances to the code and the conditional use permit will negatively affect the neighbors directly to the east, the west, and the south of this property. I wonder who's looking out for those residents, because having a 5-story apartment building is going to be completely out of character for this area of South Minneapolis, where the average apartment building or multifamily dwelling is between 2 and 3 stories high. The condos directly to the south of this property will have the entirety of the MLK City Park completely blocked from view, and they can kiss goodbye any daylight or skyscape that they could see today. It would most certainly decrease the value of the adjoining property due to the obstructed view. So instead of looking out their windows at green space and tennis courts and play yards and ball fields, the condo owners will be looking directly at a concrete and metal wall. The residents directly to the east and downhill from the proposed apartments will be robbed of sunlight and be in shadow because this is a building located at the top of the hill on Nicollet. As the sun passes behind it midday, the residences directly across from Nicollet would likewise be in the shadow of this building until the sun breaches the top of the 5-story building sometime later in the day. I can't imagine being permanently robbed of sunrises and sunsets, especially in the dead of winter when days are so short. Part of the charm of the city is being able to look out your window and see so much greenery, so many trees, look at the skyline, look at the horizon. Regarding the number of proposed apartment units in this building on this corner, I have to wonder who reviewed this, because the added pressure of approximately 40 to 80 additional vehicles parking near this intersection, because they're only going to have 37 spaces, is going to really condense and really put a pressure on here. If you've driven through this intersection, as I have over the years, you'll notice that the traffic backs up significantly between 7 and 8 in the morning, and all day during the summer, especially if the weather's nice. This building would sit at the intersection of two lane streets, one a minor arterial and the other a collector street. The added pressure from the new apartment building with 82 units is going to snarl traffic at this corner even more and put undue stress on this intersection. The requested variance reduces the minimum number of off-street parking spaces from 4 to 37. For 8 units,
Ms. Winkler, I want to let you know 2 things before you continue. 1, you're breaking up and we're having a hard time hearing. 2, you're halfway through your 10 minutes and Mr. Keene has not spoken. I assume he is representing you and you're going to run out of time.
Tim, would you like to unmute yourself and take over, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Goodman, can you hear me?
We can, sir.
Very well, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be heard as counsel for the appellant on this appeal of multiple variances. As I noted in my written submittals, the focus of the appeal is on the grant of the variance, which doubles the FAR. And as all variances, they're held to the same legal standards. The underlying FAR here is 1.7. There is a bonus that gets them to 2.04. The current FAR request is for 3.82, which is 225% greater than the 1.7 for the underlying district. The threshold findings for variance are practical difficulties. The applicant has demonstrated no practical difficulties here. The practical difficulties identified by the staff in their report is that the new zoning standards have not been adopted to implement the 2040 plan. This makes no sense. The zoning ordinance update is a legislative act. The variances are quasi-judicial in nature. The CUP variance process is being used here to sidestep the legislative process and all of its procedural requirements. Reliance on the 2040 is premature for at least 2 reasons. First, the city is in the process of holding hearings prior to the adoption of the new built form regulations. We do not know what those final provisions or standards will be. Second, within a matter of weeks, the Minnesota Supreme Court is expected to decide if the Minneapolis City Council should have undertaken environmental review under the Minnesota Environmental Rights Act prior to the adoption of the 2040 plan. The 2040 plan guides this site for mixed use. This corner of 42nd and Nicollet is an important data point in the social land use experiment known as the 2040 plan. The deregulation and permissive use of land enabled in the 2040 plan has created convulsions in the land economics in Minneapolis. Here, that deregulation has created the circumstances where the value of the property is worth more as high-density residential than the existing business as an established sit-down restaurant. What are we losing as a result of the shift in this land economics under the 2040 plan? Kern's Neighborhood Restaurant operated on this corner for 72 years with nearly 42 employees who were as diverse as the neighborhood they served, many of whom had worked here for decades. The employees kept the money in the local economy. This restaurant served as a vital gathering place for the entire community, serving public from the morning to the evening. This will be replaced by another Chernobyl-inspired apartment building with rents going to investors, not kept within the local economy. We are not moving forward. Andrew from Powderhorn hit the nail on the head. Our city is being taken over by capitalists that extract money from our local economy for their own wealth. Finally, if the city is to maintain fidelity with the 2040 plan, the developer should be held to the Corridor 6 Policy 4B, which provides require commercial retail to be incorporated into new buildings in select areas of the city with highest residential densities, high pedestrian traffic, and most frequent transit service. In closing, I speak for many Minneapolis residents when I say, if I wanted to live in a high-density city, I'd move to one. We're losing a valuable commercial corner here for unaffordable, high-density residential, and we're all suffering and poorer as a result. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Keene. Thank you also, Ms. Winkler, for being on the call today. I'm also now going to give the project applicant an opportunity to present their case. Is someone from the project team on the line? Is there someone from the project team on the line? Okay, well, if they had 4 variances and a bunch of land use approvals and couldn't take the time to be on the call, I'm going to close the public hearing and see if I'll move to see if there's anyone else who's on the line to speak. If not, I'm going to move to postpone this item. I personally think that if you have a variance, 5 variances in front of the committee and an appeal, you at least have the responsibility to show up and speak to it. So again, I'll close the public hearing and move to postpone this item 1 cycle. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Reich?
Aye.
Gordon?
Aye.
Osman?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Chair Goodman?
Aye.
There's 6 ayes.
Thank you to the clerk. We'll move on to item number 8, which is the last of our quasi-judicial issues. This is a certificate of appropriateness appeal by Liz Smith at 4736 DuPont Avenue South. I would ask Ms. Burke to please give her presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Andrea Burke and I'm the supervisor for the Historic Preservation Team in CPED. Next slide, please. Today, I'm presenting an appeal application submitted by Elizabeth Smith, who is the applicant and the appellant of the October 13th, 2020 Heritage Preservation Commission's approval of a certificate of appropriateness to replace 12 historic windows and storm windows on the property located at 4736 DuPont Avenue South in the Lyndhurst Residential Historic District in Ward 13. Next slide, please. 4736 DuPont Avenue South is a 2.5-story brick residence designed in the classical revival style by Liebenberg, Kaplan, and Martin. Next slide, please. The applicants propose to replace 12 historic wood windows and replacement storm windows, 4 windows on the front. Next slide, please. 2 windows on the side. Next slide, please. And 6 windows on the rear, with fiberglass and aluminum-clad wood windows as part of the MAC sound mitigation program. Next slide, please. On October 13th, 2020, the Heritage Preservation Commission approved the certificate of appropriateness application with conditions, specifically condition number 1, the 4 original wood windows on the front elevation of the house shall be repaired and not replaced. And number 2, the 2 original wood windows on the second floor of the side elevations shall be repaired and not replaced. The remaining windows shall be replaced as proposed, as approved by the commission. Next slide, please. As stated in the staff report, the reasons for the conditions are that removing character-defining features of a historic property that are not severely deteriorated are in conflict with the Secretary of the Interior standards number 5 and number 6. The standards recommend repair over replacement, but are flexible. In this case, window deterioration is not necessitating the proposed replacement. It is sound abatement. As such, staff recommended and the HPC approved the project to repair those windows that are most visible on the property, 4 on the front, 2 on the front side corners of the home, but allowing replacement of the 6 windows on the rear to achieve compliance with the standards. The appellant is the homeowner at 4736 DuPont Avenue South and states in their appellant application that they are appealing the denial of the certificate of appropriateness. However, the certificate of appropriateness was approved by the HPC with conditions. It is my understanding that the applicant is appealing the 2 conditions of approval stated above and seeking full approval to replace all 12 windows on the property, not just 6. This concludes my presentation and I'm available for any questions. The appellant is also present and would like to speak. Thank you.
Okay, I'll see first if there are any questions for staff. I have one. Ms. Burke, under the Secretary of Interior standards, are there no exceptions? I mean, I would think max sound abatement in this area is critical, and to suggest that we have to have an either or between preservation over sound abatement is just simply going to devalue these homes if they can't put in the MAC approved sound abatement. So what is the guidance when there are 2 compelling public interests at play?
Well, the standards don't necessarily, well, actually they don't attest for sound abatement. They simply are, they're very vague, and they state that the features of the property shall be repaired over replacement. Replacement is really only justified when there is severe deterioration, and that's a commonly held practice and statement that's held by the federal government as well as local governments and the state government. So it's very much, they can be flexible when it comes to 2, but in this case, the flexibility is kind of a gray area.
But we do have the flexibility to allow them to replace these windows for the issue of sound abatement. That's why it's in front of us, correct?
That is correct.
And do you think that we should be telling everyone living underneath a flight pattern that they can't replace their windows through max sound abatement?
You know, I'm applying the standards and I think it's very varied, and I think it's a case by case, and the commission in this case felt that it was an equal compromise or a good compromise to allow the replacements on the rear but not on the front to maintain the integrity of the home. But
the sound is the sound. It comes through whether it's in the back or the front. So it's almost saying the aesthetics of it is more important than the livability for the applicant and being able to be in their home while hearing low-flying planes.
That is one way to interpret the standards, and I think it is up to this committee to, you know, to allow that from the appellant should they desire.
Okay, I also have a question from Councilmember Gordon. Go ahead, Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much. And I think part of it was answered in terms of both the staff and the commission agreed with this limiting the number of windows being replaced. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I understand that clearly. Then I was curious if there was any effort to explore some kind of a restoration that would also have sound abatement. And I know that maybe there isn't, and I don't know that much about window design and options and alternatives and how tricky it would be to add panes of glass on an interior but change a storm window or any of those things. But was that discussed, and has that been explored kind of as a middle ground between keep the old or completely add new ones?
That's a great question, Member Gordon. Ms. Burke.
Yeah, so this was discussed at the HPC hearing between the commissioners and the applicant, that as well as a representative from the Max Sound program, that by adding the storm windows, which were approved, the difference in the sound abatement wasn't that great. I will not quote them, but I do remember that discussion being had between the chair of the HPC and a representative from the MAC program. But yes, there are other measures to sort of help towards sound abatement. Now, I will confess, it likely does not achieve the same abatement that it would with full replacement, but there are measures to reduce sound abatement or to reduce the sound coming through by adding the storm windows and some other measures. And I think that's generally, in my opinion, what guided the HPC's decision on this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. Are there any other questions for members of the committee? Seeing none, I'm going to proceed to open the public hearing. I'll give the appellant an opportunity to make her case. Is Liz Smith or her representative on the call? Looks like Liz Smith is on the call. Ms. Smith, can you keep your comments brief? Is that possible? We want to give you the requisite amount of time, but it's already running long and we have a number of comments, issues.
I'll speak as quickly as humanly possible for me.
Okay.
Okay. So first, I just want to say thanks for giving me a chance to talk about this. We bought our house a couple years ago, knowing we were in a flight path, knowing that we've been granted this MAC money that would help mitigate the noise. We were well on our way to replacing these when the project was put on hold when the historical designation study began. The planes keep us up at night. They wake us up in the morning. It's painful having our kids wake up earlier than they would normally. Sounds like the planes are on our roof. Again, we knew it when we bought it, but we knew that we were going to be able to fix it. So the HPC approved replacing all of the 12 storms that we requested, but said we could only repair the internal windows in our bedrooms rather than replacing them with the double paned windows. The MAC Sound Abatement Project Manager, as Andrea noted, said the reconditioning is not going to be the same as adding a double paned window on in those areas. Since the windows are inside of the storms that have already been approved, and we purposefully chose a design that matches the historical look of our house now, you will not be able to tell the difference between these replaced windows and what we currently have in our house. The report from the HPC states, quote, "The replacements will not negatively impact the integrity of location, setting, feeling, design, and association." So just to reiterate, the 6 windows in the house that were only approved to be repaired rather than replaced are bedroom windows, which are the most important windows for us to be able to reduce the noise. We just want to be able to sleep, and there will be no visible difference from the street because of these windows being replaced, since they are inside the storms that were already approved. So thanks for giving me a couple minutes. We hope you approve replacing our windows, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer.
Are there any questions for Ms. Smith? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Ms. Smith. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak to this item? And I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone in queue.
No further speakers registered on item 8.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. With no additional speakers, I will close the public hearing. I'm going to move to grant the appeal. I feel I am about as pro-preservation as anyone, but if you can't see the difference from the outside because of the storms, I don't see any reason to tell them that they can't use the MAC program to have these windows. If you've ever been over there, it's extremely loud, and I don't feel that this is going to have a material impact on the look of the building. And I'm not sure if I should direct staff to adopt findings based on what I have suggested in my comments above. I will direct staff to prepare findings based on the conversation above. I'll ask if there's anyone else who'd like to speak to this motion. Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Wright?
Aye.
Gordon?
Aye.
Osmond?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Chair Goodman?
Aye.
There's 6 ayes.
That item has been approved. The appeal has been granted. We have 2 discussion items in front of us, members of the committee. This is going on 2 hours, and I probably need to get up and stretch at some point. I understand that the opportunity to purchase options report is really important, and we've had staff and consultants waiting a really long period of time. So I'm wondering, we had put item 31 on discussion because we think it's such a good thing. And I'm wondering if it's possible to do a very brief staff report, or if staff would like to delay this one cycle to hear more about it. If any of the authors of the sustainability policy for the 1 to 3 unit construction want to speak to it, what is the committee's pleasure in terms of what we should do with the limited remaining time we have? Please jump in, members of the committee, if you have strong feelings.
I'm comfortable, and I don't want to offend staff who are all excited about it and want to do this, but I'm comfortable if we publicize it and learn about it outside of the committee and defer the discussion. I'm not sure about my colleagues.
I would agree with that as well.
Okay, so I think what we should do is we should move forward item number 31 so that it's not delayed in the committee process.
Right.
And then I can talk to the chair of POGO to see if there's room there to have a brief presentation. If not, I do not want to diminish all of the very, very important work of our professional staff, but I'm worried about time. So without objection, I'm going to move approval of item number 31 with a very strong thank you to staff. We'll see if anyone wants to speak to that motion. You're welcome to do so. Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on approving item number 31.
Councilmember Reich?
Aye.
Gordon?
Aye.
Osman?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Chair Goodman?
Aye.
There's 6 ayes.
Thank you. That item is approved. Then we'll move to our final item, which is a receive and file report on the opportunity to purchase policy options. I will note that when asked about the amount of time, I had suggested 20 to 30 minutes for a presentation from our consultants. So I just want everyone to be prepared that it will be a more lengthy presentation. And I would invite Katie Topinka to speak first and lead the conversation from the staff and consultants' point of view.
Thank you, Chair Goodman and committee members. We are here today. We have 2 consultants with us who I'll introduce in a moment to present to you policy options for an opportunity to purchase policy. The subject matter for an opportunity to purchase or right of first refusal policy was introduced last year, and the council received a presentation on Washington, D.C.'s Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act in a study session last September. Since that time, the city engaged with the Coalition for Nonprofit Housing and Economic Development out of Washington, D.C. and Twin Cities LISC to do an analysis of our market, talk to stakeholders, and bring forward policy options for your consideration. So today, Scott Bruton from CNHED and Gretchen Nichols from Twin Cities LISC will present these policy options. The purpose of the presentation is for you to be able to gain an understanding of these policy options, ask questions, and potentially provide some input. Given, as Chair Goodman noted, there's a lot of information to get through in a relatively short amount of time, so we would recommend that questions be held until the end as much as possible because there is a lot of content to get through. And then finally, in addition to myself and the consultants, Andrea Brennan, Kim Keller, and Joel Fussy from the City Attorney's Office are here to answer questions from staff, or if there are questions for staff, excuse me. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Nichols and Mr. Bruton, and I believe Gretchen is going to kick off the presentation.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thanks to the amazing support of Katie Topinka and the city staff team that provided valuable oversight, input, and perspective to this project. I think I'm just going to give guidance to switch the slides. So I'll ask to go ahead and advance to the next one. We do feel fortunate to get to this point, given the tumultuous times we're in. We began the study in February and made necessary adjustments due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the aftermath of the death of George Floyd. We are in unprecedented times, and housing stability and racial inequalities continue to plague our community, disrupting health, safety, and the well-being of our most vulnerable residents. The policy options presented today are in response to 3 proposed objectives: enabling tenants' rights to counteract displacement, expanding affordable housing options, and supporting new pathways to homeownership. We'd like to express our gratitude to the many stakeholders that informed this process. Within the limitations of virtual formats, we conducted 3 stages of engagement to loop back and gather insights and refine the policy options to better respond to our unique community context. In the 3 options that we'll be presenting today, we will reflect different goals or policy objectives. Yet offer the ability to mix and match or plug and play key elements to further refine or approach that best fits the local context. The options also try to take into account the projected budget challenges facing the city and the need to minimize additional financial and administrative obligations. You can switch to the next slide. Based on Minneapolis rental license data, an inventory of the local housing market illustrates that the majority of rental properties are single family, or 57%, and 2 to 4 unit properties, which is 32% of the inventory. In addition, some portions of the city offer single family rental options, as the larger multifamily properties are mainly located in the downtown vicinity and along major corridors and the University of Minnesota area. Next slide. Based on data from Hennepin County Assessor's Office, the number of apartment sales per year from 2005 to 2019 illustrates the number of transactions that would likely occur over a given year. 3 key points for this data. Single-family properties are excluded because it's difficult to know if the property was used for home ownership or rental use prior to sale. New construction projects, or those that are under 10 years old, are excluded in response to stakeholder concerns about impeding outside equity for new construction. And lastly, 1031 exchange. We identified that national and local data indicates that about 30% of multifamily property sales utilize 1031 exchange options. The green column is a breakdown of the 5+ unit properties that used 1031s in 2019. To save time, we're going to skip forward to slide 9, and I'll hand it off to Scott Burden.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So as part of the research process, we looked into about a little over a dozen other jurisdictions around the country that had either implemented or were in the process of implementing opportunity to purchase programs. The oldest was Washington, D.C., that instituted it back in 1980, and it was quickly followed by a suburb of Washington, Montgomery County, Maryland. I won't go, this table is not meant to go into all of these, but we did go through each of these. We evaluated their different primary characteristics, looked into how they were operated and the different types of housing they focused on, as well as the different ways that they were implemented. And these 8 here were the jurisdictions that influenced most the 3 options that we're going to talk about today that we've prepared for you. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. Oh, you can skip this slide. Okay, wonderful, thanks. So we're going to be talking with you about 3 different options. In talking with the city staff team, as well as in going through the 50+ interviews with stakeholders, and I guess we're getting close to 20 focus groups that we've conducted now with groups of stakeholders, we divided the options up into 3 different ones. These 3 different options are roughly based on three different examples from other jurisdictions. Option 1 is based loosely on Washington, D.C.'s model. Option 2 is based on the Berkeley, California model, which Berkeley is currently in the process of adopting. And option 3 is based on the San Francisco, California model. And we felt that based on the conversations we've had with all of those folks through interviews and focus groups, that these these three different options kind of epitomize the different choices that the stakeholders were particularly interested in, both government and non-government stakeholders, in pursuing. And I'll go through those options in a second. With each of the options, we divided properties up by size in order to try to tailor the different timelines and applicable rules to the particular sizes of properties. In other jurisdictions, for example, in Washington, D.C., 5+ unit properties are all grouped together. In trying to have these further breakdowns, we wanted to tailor timelines and particular rules to make them have as little impact as possible on the multifamily or single-family housing market. And so you can go ahead and go to the next slide, and we'll start with option 1. So option 1 focuses on tenants' rights and preventing displacement of tenants and existing tenant communities. In option 1, only a tenant in a single-family unit or a tenant organization in a multifamily property may exercise rights. Option 1 provides the residents of a property with the greatest amount of discretion in choosing development options and the future of their community. This option does not require the preservation of or the increase in affordability at the property. It also allows tenants to assign their rights to a third party of their choice. That could be to an individual or an organization, a corporate entity. We do note, and we'll get into this a bit later, that with option 1 and 2, which do have rights for tenants, that city funding for the provision of technical assistance to tenant organizations by community-based nonprofits is highly recommended to increase the successful exercise of the opportunity to purchase. This is based on the track record of tenants exercising their rights in Washington, D.C. over the past 40 years. And I'm happy to go into that more in the question and answer period. You can go ahead and move to the next slide. So don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of this. We have put together process or flowchart diagrams for options 1, 2, and 3, which we're happy to utilize in the question and answer period to help you understand the decision-making tree that tenants have in each of the options. And just a color coding, the red box at the top represents the starting of the process. Green boxes represent tenant choices in the process, and the yellow boxes represent if a tenant starts to work with a development partner, and the blue boxes represent the ultimate outcomes of the decision-making trees. You can go ahead and move on. Option 2 balances the interests of the residents of a property in deciding the future of their community with the policy priorities of increased tenant protections and rent stabilization. In option 2, a tenant organization, or a qualified organization are able to exercise these rights. Tenants may exercise their rights and assign them in option 2. The tenant in a single family unit may assign their rights to a person or an entity. A tenant organization in a 2 to 4 unit property may assign them to a person or entity. And then a tenant organization in a 5+ unit property may assign its rights to a qualified organization. The limitation of in a 5+ unit property of assigning it to a qualified organization is that, and this is again based on the Berkeley model and somewhat on the San Francisco model, is that the city in this case sets up criteria that developers would then have to apply to be certified based on those criteria to be a qualified organization. Those would be such things as experience running a multifamily property, experience working with affordable housing properties, experience in the Minneapolis market, and demonstrated that they are not running slum properties, in that they keep their properties up and run them responsibly. The reason that we did not restrict to a qualified organization for single unit or 2 to 4 unit properties is that we got feedback from government employees as well as from stakeholders that single family and 2 to 4 unit are the way that many BIPOC developers come into the market. And while a qualified organization for a 5+ would need a track record, we wanted to have a way into the multifamily market where less experienced developers or developers of color who had trouble getting into the market would still have a means to enter the market, gain levels of experience, and then be able to qualify to be a qualified organization. So any person or entity that purchases a property using the opportunity to purchase policy and continues its use as a rental housing accommodation, that means they don't buy it, say like a single family property to live in or convert it to a condominium or cooperative, would be required by the city to abide by just cause eviction, source of income discrimination protections, and rent stabilization restrictions. We realize that for a variety of reasons, Minneapolis does not have just cause eviction restrictions. The reason you would be able to do that under this option or this program is that you would be signing, the developer would be signing on voluntarily to exercise this right. Same thing with source of income discrimination protections. We know that there are such protections in law now, but they're being challenged in court, and we include this here in case that challenge wins in court and that law does not go forward. And same thing with rent stabilization restrictions. We realize that those are not allowed under Minnesota law, but because this is a voluntary program, those can be a restriction that's placed on the exercise of the right. As with option 1, we do recommend that the city provide technical assistance funding to enable community-based organizations to assist tenant organizations. You can go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, go ahead and move on to the next one. Option 3. Option 3 focuses on preventing displacement of tenants and existing tenant communities and preserving or increasing affordability. Under option 3, only qualified organizations that have met certain criteria for owning and managing affordable properties set by the city may exercise rights. Under option 3, tenants have no rights to have a say in the disposition of the property. By limiting exercise of the opportunity to purchase to qualified organizations, option 3 minimizes the time needed to evaluate a property, submit an offer, respond to an offer, secure financing, and close a deal. This is the model that has been adopted by the city of San Francisco in California. And this is the model that tries to insert it or to influence or to change the market dynamics or the timeline of the normal market in the normal selling and closing on a property. It also provides the most narrow ability to exercise the right in that only qualified developers are allowed to exercise and only under certain restrictions. Again, tenants would have no say, and this is the most limiting on the community inside the property. So any entity that purchases a property using the opportunity to purchase policy would be required by the city to abide by just cause eviction, source of income discrimination protections, and to enroll the property in the City of Minneapolis 4D Affordable Housing Incentive Program. I'm happy in the question and answer period to go into why we chose that as the particular restriction for income and rent restricting the properties. Well, I'll just leave it at that. I'm happy to go into more details for why we chose that one. You can go ahead and move on to the next slide. Go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay. have no fear, I'm not going to go into all of this. This diagram represents that what I talked about earlier, where we have broken down the three options by different unit sizes. And you can see for the different stages in the process, the registration of interest, negotiation period, acceptance of offer and right of first refusal, secure financing and closing, that as the units get smaller in each option, the time to exercise those particular stages of the process gets smaller. And so for a 2 to 4 unit, the total time to exercise all of the stages is significantly shorter than if you're dealing with a 50+ unit building. You'll also notice that in option 3, the number of days for each of the options or the stages of the option are even significantly smaller than option 1 and 2. And then I will note in option 2, 4 times when tenants choose not to exercise their option and a qualified developer decides to exercise their option, then the timelines for particular stages of the process are the same as those for option 3 when tenants are not involved. And so we've done everything we can to allow the process to work effectively, but to minimize timelines. So you can go ahead and move forward. Okay. We also received many questions from staff and stakeholders about what would be the difference between the how the current market works and the days that any of these options would add to the normal process. And so we've used CoStar data for 5+ unit properties here to give you both average days on the market and the highest number of days on the market, because not all properties are equal and some have varying circumstances. With the 2 right-hand columns, we give you the maximum days that would be allowable under the timeline restrictions. And you can compare that, and in the question and answer, we're happy to go into that more. For single family and 2 to 4 units, we just recently received information from the Realtors Association, and we're digesting that data, and we'll be adding that into this table for the final report. You can go ahead and move on to the next slide. There are, for each of these options, exemptions. If an owner of a property believes that they are exempt based on one of these, that they would file a notice of transfer that tenants would be able to challenge to make sure that it's not specious. And the exemptions, which I'm happy to go through in Q&A, are of 2 main types. One, based on property type. The second, based on type of transfer. I will note specifically here that we do recommend exempting single-family homes owned by a real person as their sole residential rental property. I'm happy to go into that in more detail as to why that's important. And for types of transfers, that covers certain types of corporate and family transfers as well as court-ordered transfers. You can go ahead and go on to the next slide. City staff asked us to list the standard duties for administration and enforcement that city staff would need to do under each of these programs. We've done that, and I'm happy again to go through Q&A with this, but we've grouped it by standard administrative enforcement responsibilities, and then we have some that are specific to option 2 and 3 that deal with managing the qualified organization selection process, as well as the restrictions that go with exercising those rights. You can go ahead and move forward. Staffing requirements. Staff asked us also to recommend staffing requirements based on the models in other jurisdictions and how these work. And go ahead and move forward, trying to be conscious of time. Thank you. I'll boil this down very quickly based on examples in other cities. We recommend that the city should consider funding, up to, sorry, we skipped, I think we might have skipped up. I'll just go ahead and go back 1 second. My apologies. Staffing requirements, thanks. That we recommend there would need to be, sorry, go ahead and go on. We're missing part of it here. Thanks. Also for technical assistance, we recommend up to 8 FTEs for technical assistance for community-based nonprofits to provide technical assistance. This would not be required, but I'm happy in the Q&A to go into why this technical assistance would be well worth the money spent for either option 1 and 2. You can go ahead and move forward. So now for the Q&A section, we do have sort of a list of the responsibilities or the decisions that the council will need to make. They would be picking option 1, 2, or 3, or doing kind of a mix and match between, for example, option 2 could have a requirement of using the 4D program instead of rent stabilization, but picking the options and the main components to it. In picking those options, you would need to determine whether you're going to allow assignability of rights and if you're going to limit it to qualified organizations or to the tenants. Unit size, do you want to allow everything from single family on up, or do you want to have exemptions for single family or smaller properties? Age of properties. There's a lot of churn in the ownership of new properties within their first several years after being built. You could consider exempting properties that are under, say, 7 or 10 years old. You could, if you fund adequate tenant technical assistance, consider requiring tenant organizations to actually work with the tenant assistance provider to exercise their rights to make sure that they are being fully formed and assisted in this complex process. And then, do you want to have rent stabilization or rent restrictions? What criteria do you want to put on being a qualified organization for option 2 or 3? And then what types of exemptions do you want to have for any of the options? You can go ahead and move forward. And that's the end. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sure Gretchen has as well. Thank you for going along with us on that whirlwind presentation.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Obviously, that is a lot of very complicated and detailed intellectual data. So I'm not even sure I kept up with the entire presentation, and I'm known for being relatively intelligent. So I'm a little bit concerned that we're not going to really be able to have a conversation here because I'm not sure I really even understand the basics when 3 options are being thrown at me and I'm down to just like a handful of very, very basic questions. So I'll see who on the committee would like to ask questions. This is a receive and file. There are several authors on the committee, so they're probably more educated than some of the rest of us. So I'll just see if any of them have questions. I don't want to dominate the amount of time we have left. Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Chair Goodman. I first and foremost want to just thank LISC and Scott for all of their work. It is a lot. We're really working hard to get this policy up and running. I think for my colleagues, the things to look at, or which I think are very ingenuitive, is just how long the time is to have these rights. I think it's worth noting that these would be new rights that we would be having in the city for tenants. I think that part's very exciting. But of course, this always comes at the kind of the legal trade-offs. You know, we are going to be looking at, you know, how long does the homeowner or the landowner have their rights a little bit infringed upon. And I thought one of the smartest parts was kind of the tiering, like for the bigger units, the bigger buildings, you know, we had a little bit more time as opposed to some of the smaller ones. So I think that there's a lot of ingenuity in this. I can see where that would make it a lot complex, and just kind of want to, besides thanking all the city staff also that have worked on this, just kind of extend an offer to, I'm happy to speak with any of my colleagues offline and really go through kind of the nuts and bolts of this ordinance.
Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you. I was trying to scroll back to the presentation, so it is often a lot of information. I was wondering, one of the key issues seemed to be in some of the options, the tenants have a right to maybe sell their option or trade it or assign it to somebody? And why, what are the benefits of having that? And why would there be some options that don't allow that? I'm just wondering, is there a rationale? It seems like then we move up to options 2, I think it was, and certainly 3, and they no longer have that right to, that they get to keep. Instead, it's kind of a right that city gets to have.
It's an excellent question, sir. When Washington, D.C. instituted its program 40 years ago, their main intent was to mitigate gentrification and displacement. And so they allowed tenants to do everything from assign their rights for consideration, that would be, say, a buyout to move out of the property, to converting it to a condo, or allowing the developer they would partner with to make it an upscale rental property as long as the tenants got to stay in the property. And so, yes, option 1 does allow tenants to receive consideration, either a payment or other types of consideration in exchange for assigning their right. And it allows basically the tenants of the community to make what they think is the best decision for them. Option 2, as you noted, does put limits on that. And the reason it is there are some folks who have concerns or who voiced concerns about tenants having that much discretion. And then, as you noted, option 3 eliminates all discretion for tenants. And so we try to leave it as much open to the policy decision, because this is really not a cost-benefit analysis here. This is a choice to change the dynamics of the rental housing market by instituting a policy like that. And so we tried to give the council a broad spectrum of available choices in how they wanted to make that intervention.
So do you think if the tenants don't hold on to that right, they're more likely to be displaced then because they won't have the same kind of leverage?
We do. That is a tough question. Tenants will have, with any of these 3 options, far more leverage than they do under the current system today in Minneapolis. And I personally worked with a group of tenants in my previous job where the tenants of a Section 8 property negotiated with the developer to assign their rights, and that developer built a high-rise, high-income building on one half the property and a Section 8 and low-income housing tax credit building on the other half of the property, retaining the property, but also each tenant, each household at the property received $125,000, which for these households was life-changing money. And so there are all types of possibilities, but I can talk to other times where tenants took a few $1,000s because they were not adequately informed of their rights, and took an uninformed buyout that had little impact and could have paid for very little beyond their moving expenses. And so that's why one could either consider limiting what they can do, say with option 2, but still allowing them the right, or you could, if you provide enough funding for tenants to receive assistance from community-based nonprofits, you could provide them with well-educated and experienced guidance on making choices. I do like to, when we've done the focus groups, I like to remind folks that no housing developer goes through buying and selling of properties all on their own. They all hire lawyers, they all hire development experts, they all hire, people who deal in the spreadsheets and the law to help them with things, and tenants should, would also benefit from that kind of assistance.
Well, thank you very much. And I know it's getting late in the day here. I just want to say thanks for providing all this information. I think Councilmember Schrader and I and Pletcher and others who are working on this have our work cut out for us now. I think we're going to be looking at this. We're going to be certainly going back to our external community partners and getting their impression of it. And then I think we're going to have to start crafting probably a hybrid or of some kind over these options, and then bringing it back to our colleagues to kind of see where we think there is support for this, and certainly also working with our CPED staff. And I really want to extend my gratitude to Ms. Topinka and all of the CPED group that's been helping with this, and Lisk and all the team from our consultants too. So thank you very much. I guess I could move to receive and file if that would be helpful.
You can, but I have a list of about 10 questions that I'm going to go through. I was just trying to be polite to everybody.
All right, go for it.
I do appreciate you saying that we might have something that isn't one of these three options, but a hybrid of all of them. I'm wondering if the consultant could tell me where there is a legal opinion that says we can do any of these things. So I'm a little bit afraid that we have kind of like a wish list of things we want to do without any legal analysis of whether or not we have the right to delay a sale. Do we have the right to force a just cause eviction? Do we have the right to tell developers or purchasers that they have to pay off tenants? Where is the legal analysis that says under Minnesota law, which is different than California law, that we have the right to do any of this?
I can answer that by saying we were not contracted to provide a legal analysis. What we can say is that all of the provisions in these three options are based on existing programs in other jurisdictions.
But other jurisdictions have different laws. I mean, we can't have red light cameras. Illinois has red light cameras. I mean, it's a very basic public policy 101 that every state has a different law. So I know we can't do just cause eviction in the state of Minnesota. So what about this allows us to do that if the state prohibits it?
So again, I'm not a lawyer and we were not tasked with providing legal opinions on these things, but I'll just remind what I mentioned in the presentation is that these are not requirements. These are voluntarily opting in. And so if a developer or tenants wish to exercise that right, they would be voluntarily opting into an agreement or a restriction where they would abide by these. It's not a legal requirement. It is a voluntary opting in.
Okay, I'm not going to debate you. I'm just simply going to ask these questions. What is the public purpose of requiring this for market rate and above market rate properties? I can understand the public purpose involved in trying to preserve affordable Section 8 and NOAA type properties, but I can't understand why we would want a very expensive apartment building, the tenants to say, hey, we'd rather have a condo than an apartment, so we're going to stand in the way of a sale. For what purpose? Expanding home ownership isn't, I don't think, a good enough public purpose to suggest that we would have market rate projects and buildings involved in this, but affordable very well might be. So what is your reasoning for including all properties, not just affordable, NOAA, Section 8, et cetera?
So we aren't recommending that you pick any particular option. We're just providing the kind of spectrum of possibilities for you. For option one, where there are no affordability restrictions, that option does prioritize the actual residents at the property making the decision. And so say, for example, it's a tenant who's been living in a single family home for several years, and they would like to be able to continue living there and to buy the property. It gives them the first right to do that. And the owner of the property would have to choose them as long as they could meet the terms and the price of the contract. And so in that way, it's prioritizing anti-displacement. That said, with option 2 and option 3, if it were a building that was not considered either naturally affordable relative to Minneapolis standards, or that had like a subsidy or restriction already on it, then with option 2 and 3, there are requirements to either put rent stabilization on the property if you opt in to do that, or to sign up for the 4D program, which does provide rent and income restrictions, which would create the affordability that you mentioned.
But with a single family home as an example, so you have $1 million house being rented to someone for $4,000 a month, what is our interest in intervening in a sale like that? Or even a $500,000 house, anyone with a house of that value is not going to be renting to low-income tenants. What is our interest in trying to delay that sale?
So that is not for me to speak to. That option reflects what's been done in other jurisdictions, as well as the feedback we received from the many stakeholder interviews and focus groups. And so we were tasked with coming up with a variety of options that reflected the spectrum of interests. And it's ultimately up to the council to determine which values you want to reflect in one of these policies or a combination of these policies or programs if you so choose to adopt them.
So who in the focus groups was interested in preserving above market rate and market rate properties over NOAA or others? Who are what kind of person would even come to a focus group and suggest that a very high-end apartment building should be converted to condos, and that's a public interest as it pertains to affordable housing, which is actually in displacement, which is why I thought we were doing this.
So the general principle of tenants' rights is that all tenants, as in that role, has the right to activate their right to purchase. So it's not to say that only lower income residents should have a right. It's to say that all tenants should have a right to make those choices and decisions. So that was the perspective that we're reflecting in these options.
Thank you. That would answer the question. I appreciate that. When you sell a property, the private markets require like 20% down. Sometimes it's even more. It sounds like you're talking about a set equity requirement at 5%. How will that work? If the people financing these deals want a higher amount down, where will that kind of money come from if not from the government?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So in a single family situation, that would be the responsibility of the individual or the household that was trying to buy. Same with 2 to 4. In single family or 2 to 4, as an individual or family, you can actually get the type of financing to pull off the purchase of a property if you were the tenant or were assigned the rights by the tenant. With a 5+ unit property, the financing systems in place for those sizes of properties are not conducive to either a single tenant or a group of tenants coming together. And so the normal way that tenants in these circumstances exercise their rights is by assigning their right to a developer that they partner with. So that said, if they were to form a limited equity cooperative, you're absolutely right. They would have to have government assistance in putting down a deposit on that 5% deposit on the property. On the other hand, if you were going to convert to a condominium, or if you were going to continue as a rental property, then whichever developer, whether it be an affordable housing developer or a market rate developer, would have the creditworthiness and experience and wherewithal to get that 5% deposit and to put it down as your partner.
Why would we want to delay a sale for up to a year? Why would government want to be involved in delaying the sale of properties? It's a small amount of time I can understand, but under the very quick chart I just saw, I don't have this presentation in writing, it said it could be up to 365 days of a delayed sale. And I'm also interested in why you've eliminated a 1031 exchange. I mean, I was the author of advance notice, so I kind of know the pitfalls on some of these things. And certainly exempted 1031 exchanges, but you guys have not suggested that. Why not?
Okay. So first to the question of why would a government want to adopt one of these programs and intervene in this way? The answer is that the government would be making a value choice if you chose to do this, in saying that it is worthwhile to give people who live in the community, who live in that particular property, the right to have a say in what happens. Because now, and you mentioned the 1031 exchange and the quickness with which sales can happen, basically the way the market works now is it prioritizes who can come up with the money the fastest. And so I think Minneapolis has experienced that hedge funds are coming in and buying up a lot of properties ever since the Great Recession. Hedge funds are usually able to outcompete others because they have cash on hand and they don't even need to get a loan. They just pay the cash without getting a mortgage. And so that prioritizes a certain type of buyer, a certain type of sale, and also that changes the nature of your rental or ownership market. If you choose a policy like this or a program like this, then you are intervening in the market, and the real estate market is one of the most heavily intervened. So this is not a new thing. There's all types of public good that jurisdictions around the country intervene in, like the process for, is to say that the highest value is not selling to whomever has the most money and can close fastest, that there are other values that the council may choose to prioritize over that, and other outcomes that the council may choose to prioritize over that. As for the question about 1031 exchanges, San Francisco specifically put in its law that a qualified developer exercising rights under that program, under the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, COPA, should make best efforts to collaborate with the owner of the property to time the sale and the closing of the property to enable the property owner to engage in a 1031 exchange. And that's why, that's a significant portion for why they have the significantly shorter timelines. One thing to note about the San Francisco option is, or the program is, that they have no final deadlines on closing. For option 3, we did put a final deadline on closing, so there would be much more surety to that. But if you do want to prioritize the ability to carry over or to not have to pay these taxes at the time of a sale, then you would move toward option 3, because it would have much tighter timelines, and you could also encourage the qualified developers to collaborate with the property owner in doing this. If, again, this is priorities, if the priority of the 1031 exchange and its impact on your local rental and ownership property market are important to the council, then you would move toward option 3.
Scott, would you, sorry to interrupt, I'm sorry, council member.
Go ahead.
The 45-day window, I think, is important. I don't know that that got really digested.
Yes, that is an important. One of the things that we did with this program, which is different than Washington, D.C.'s model, is that we split the rights up into the right of first offer and the right of first refusal. The right of first offer, which is the 45 days that Gretchen was mentioning, say for a 50-unit building or less for smaller buildings, if tenants or a qualified organization do not file with the city and with the owner of the property a statement of interest in purchasing the property within that, say, first 20 or 45 days, depending on the timeline that's applicable, then the owner of the property is free to sell to anyone on the third-party market. And so that, whereas other jurisdictions don't provide surety for many months to a property owner as to whether or not the tenants are going to be involved, the property owner under any of the 3 options that we're talking about here would know if the tenants or a qualified organization would be involved in the process within at most 45 days, and that's for 50-plus unit buildings when tenants are involved. And so that we believe provides more clarity and assurance to a property owner if the tenants are not going to be engaged at all.
So I have 8 more questions, and I see what time it is. So I guess I would just say to my colleagues who think this is going to be simple and we should move it fast, there are questions about staffing. I'm hearing up to 8 staff on the outside and 2 to 4 on the inside. I don't know how that would be paid for. Sounds like the people who manage and own real estate are vehemently against this, so litigation will follow probably no matter what, unlike advance notice where we were able to get to a place cooperatively. So I'm not sure kind of what the next step is for me to get all these questions answered, since this is the first time I'm seeing this presentation, yet 4 of the members of the council have been working on it, as they would argue, for a whole year. So I'm not sure, I mean, we're going to receive and file this today, but I mean, I have a lot more questions than the very few that I asked, and they were gracious enough to give me personally 15 minutes of time during this presentation. It sounds like there needs to be a lot more conversation. I'll just say that. And having everyone who represents those who own property being against this is just absolute blueprint for litigation. And then it wouldn't be put into place anyway. So all of this work would almost be for naught if we don't get to a place where property owners, realtors, managers, single family homeowners who are going to find out they can't sell their property are upset about it. Then it's just nothing's going to happen, and we're not going to be able to do right by tenants fast anyway. So I would urge us to really look through some of these questions and take them seriously. And I bet others have questions as well. I mean, this was a very fast report. It was a ton of information, and it's probably not the best way to pass policy, to have half of the council, if not more, have a 20-minute presentation on this and then have to vote on something like this. Councilmember Gordon, followed by Councilmember Schrader. Go ahead, sir. Either one. Councilmember Gordon's next in line, and then Councilmember Schrader.
All right, thank you very much. And I appreciate the discussion that we've been able to have today. It's really valuable. I know we did actually have early on in this, we had some deeper study session opportunities that we invited folks to as we were digging in on this, and we certainly will be digging in on it in the future. I will note that in many of those groups that you listed, who you thought everyone was opposed to it, I'm in there, and I love this idea. So I think we'll actually find a lot of property owners think that this is a reasonable and helpful thing, and it could really bring some good to our community. And we'll certainly, I'm certainly committed to helping bring more of those on board in the days ahead. I also think it might be helpful. It was helpful here to get some advance notice of your questions, but if you want to even forward those to us, we can look at those. And I think that staff and council members would be happy to brief and talk one-on-one with our colleagues as we move forward. I think one of the reasons we're not taking any action today, except to receive and file it, is so that we have some time to sleep on this, so we have some time to hear the way other people are responding to the report. I mean, this is really a big deal to get this body of work completed and before us now and organized in a way that if we take the time, we can dig into the details effectively. So I appreciate that this is a big step, a difficult step, a challenging step, one we might have to take in phases, but we are on our way, and I think this actually could have a major impact on addressing some of the biggest problems we're facing as a city in terms of our housing and the crisis that we find ourselves in. So I'm excited about moving on and getting to the next steps. I'm not thinking we're going to probably pass anything by the end of the year, so I think it's going to even take more time and more work for us to get this right.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. I'll note I was at the study session. The authors were there and a handful of other people. I was one of the other people, and I've seen nothing until today. So, and that was a very dense report to ask. And my notes, I want to just show you my notes of questions are this. I don't have them written down like in an email or something. I've just been taking notes from the screen. I don't have a printer or any paper here to be able to do that. So just understand we're all working remotely. I don't have like a list of typed up questions from a report I saw 5 minutes ago. Well, now it's 25 minutes. Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Chair Goodman. And I would just take a picture of your notes, send them to Councilmember Gordon, and I would be happy to answer those. And some of this is there are answers to your questions. There's been a lot of work on this since February, since the consultants have been reaching out to stakeholders and having very in-depth conversations about the questions you're asking. this is it is a very dense policy. I think there is a lot of smart answers to it. And like Councilmember Gordon said, we're looking at this wouldn't be even go through by the end of the year, where this is really the start of the conversation. We'd love to have a much longer, in-depth presentation on this, but at the end of the year, it gets tough and everything gets backed up a little bit. So with COVID and all of that happening, I again just appreciate the work of the consultants and the work of city staff, and we'll be moving forward and continuing the conversations with all of our colleagues.
I'm pretty sure Councilmember Gordon moved to receive and file. Do you want to concur, Councilmember Gordon? You did move that, correct?
That is correct.
On Councilmember Gordon's motion to receive and file, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Rake?
Aye.
Gordon?
Aye.
Osman?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Chair Goodman?
Aye.
There's 6 ayes.
That item has been received and filed to move on to the next portion of our process. Are there any, I see that the agenda has been concluded, but I wanted to see if anyone else had anything they wanted to say. Seeing no further business and without objection, we stand adjourned.